नमस्कार सबैलाई। सबभन्दा पहिले यस महाविहारमा विराजमान हाम्रो परम शास्त्र साकिम बुद्धलाई मेरो भित्री हृदयदेखि नमन र अभिवादन र यहाँ मञ्चमा आसीन बन्ने व्यक्तित्वहरू प्राचार्यज्यू, नेपाल बौद्ध परिषदका कार्यवाहक अध्यक्षज्यू, आज यस लेक्चर सिरिजहरू तेस्रो लेक्चर सिरिजमा आज लेक्चररको रूपमा आमन्त्रित अलेक्जेन्डर ओ निलज्यू सबैप्रति मेरो हार्दिक नमन र अभिवादन छ। यो हाम्रो यो लेक्चर सिरिज अहिले सङ्ख्यात्मक रूपमा भन्यो भने यो तेस्रो लेक्चर सिरिज हो। हामीले सुरुदेखि नै अहिले सुरुमा चाहिँ हामीले जुम मार्फत लेक्चर सिरिज हो, त्यतिखेर टाइम पनि त्यस्तै थियो। अब यो जुन उहाँको परिचय दिइहाल्नुभन्दा पहिले अलिकति छोटो यस बारेमा पनि कुरा गर्न चाहन्छु। हाम्रो यो कलेजको मुख्य विशेषता भनेको के हो भन्दाखेरि यो नामैले थाहा हुन्छ, यो महायान स्ट्रिम कलेज हो कि। महायान भन्ने बित्तिकै यहाँ अब सूत्र र तन्त्र दुइटै यहाँ पढेको भइहाल्यो होइन। अब पारमिता र मन्त्र नै वज्रयानको चाहिँ यहाँ पढेको हुन्छ। त्यो हिसाबले चाहिँ नि अब हामीले यसको लिटरेचर के हो त? महायान वज्रयानको पारमिता नय मन्त्र नयको लिटरेचर के हो भन्दाखेरि संस्कृत बुद्धिस्ट लिटरेचर हो। संस्कृत बुद्धिस्ट लिटरेचर चाहिँ एकदमै यो धेरै सङ्ख्यामा छ। हामीले नदेखेको थाहा नपाएको मात्रै हो होइन। बुद्धिस्ट त्रिपिटक चाहिँ अब पालीमा पनि छ, संस्कृत बुद्धिस्ट त्रिपिटक पनि भन्छ। यो होइन कि बुद्धिस्ट त्रिपिटक भनेको पाली त्रिपिटक मात्रै होइन, संस्कृत बुद्धिस्ट त्रिपिटक पनि हो कि। अब ट्रान्सलेटेड भएर अहिले पनि अब चाइनामा पनि ताइसी त्रिपिटक भनेर त्यही छ, जापानमा छ होइन, तिब्बतमा चाहिँ कङ्गिर छ। त्यही भएर हामीले चाहिँ एउटा विहङ्गम दृष्टि बनाएर बुद्धिस्ट लिटरेचर भनेको खालि पालीमा मात्रै सीमित छैन भनेर बुझ्नुपर्छ भन्दाखेरि। अनि हाम्रो यो कलेजको पनि मुख्य विशेषता भनेको महायान बुद्धिज्म हो। त्यसमा चाहिँ अब पारमिता नय अनि मन्त्र नयको पनि यहाँ पढाइ हुन्छ होइन। त्यसको लागि हामीलाई लिटरेचर चाहिन्छ। बुद्ध वचन अब भगवान् बुद्धले के भन्नुभएको छ होइन, अनि आचार्यहरूले कसरी त्यसलाई चाहिँ डिस्क्राइब गर्नुभएको छ शास्त्रको रूपमा होइन। उहाँले धेरै आफ्ना भ्युजहरू आफूले बुझेका कुरा भगवान् बुद्धको बुद्ध वचनलाई सरल ढङ्गले एकदमै सर्वसुलभ ढङ्गले एकदम अब सिलसिलेवार ढङ्गले उहाँले व्याख्या गर्नुभएको छ। त्यो लिटरेचरहरूको बारे पनि बुझ्नुपर्छ। ती मध्ये पनि आज जुन विषयमा अहिले लेक्चर हुँदैछ एकदम धुरन्धुर बौद्ध नेवार बौद्ध विद्वान भन्छु होइन, उहाँले चाहिँ लेक्चर गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ। त्यो आज चाहिँ नि हाम्रो नवसूत्र सङ्ग्रह भन्ने छ नि है, हाम्रो धर्म मण्डलमा छ। नेवार बुद्धिज्मको चाहिँ नि 3वटा मण्डलमध्ये बुद्ध मण्डल, धर्म मण्डल, सङ्घ मण्डल मध्ये धर्म मण्डलमा चाहिँ नि अब हाम्रो अब यो 9वटा ठुल्ठुलो वैपुल्य ग्रन्थहरू छन् कि। वैपुल्य भनेको पनि बुद्ध वचन नै हो। त्यो तपाईँले द्वादशाङ्गमा हेर्नुहोस् न, त्यसमा वैपुल्य भनेको पनि छ। किन वैपुल्य भन्यो भन्दाखेरि त्यो वैपुल्यले चाहिँ नि अब बोधिसत्वको एक्टिभिटीहरूको व्याख्या गर्छ। त्यो वैपुल्य चाहिँ नि शून्यतासम्म नि व्याख्या गर्छ कि। त्यही भएर त्यसलाई चाहिँ भाष भन्छ होइन, संस्कृतमा के इङ्ग्लिसमा त्यो वैपुल्य हो। ती वैपुल्यमध्ये एउटा तपाईँले नोट गर्नुभयो होला, नवसूत्र सङ्ग्रहमा चाहिँ नि एउटा गुह्य समाज तन्त्र भन्ने पनि छ नि है। तर त्यो गुह्य समाज तन्त्र किन रहन गयो होइन? वास्तवमा हुनुपर्ने कुन चाहिँ टेक्स्ट थियो त्यसमा के रहनु पर्ने हो, तर किन त्यो गुह्य समाज तन्त्र नै त्यहाँ अब पहिलेका गुरुजहरूले त्यो राख्न बाध्य हुनुभयो भनौँ न उहाँहरू होइन। किनकि तथागत गुह्यक हुनुपर्ने हो, तथागतगुह्यक सूत्र हुनुपर्ने हो। त्यसको ठाउँमा चाहिँ अब यो गुह्य समाज तन्त्र रहनु गयो किन? त्यसको बारेमा उहाँले चाहिँ बताउँदै हुनुहुन्छ। त्यो रहस्य घातन हुँदैछ होइन। त्यही भएर अब मेरो विचारमा भनौँ है, उहाँको त त्यो पुष्टि त हुँदै नै छ। मैले पहिला यो हाम्रो नवसूत्र सङ्ग्रहकै अध्ययन गर्दाखेरि होइन, गुह्य समाज तन्त्र र तथागतगुह्यक सूत्र सिमिलर हो कि डिफ्रेन्ट हो भनेर त्यसको डिफ्रेन्सिएसन पाउन खोजिरहेको थिएँ होइन मैले। अनि एउटा त्यो शास्त्र चाहिँ नि मैले शास्त्रमा के लेखेको भेटाएँ भन्दाखेरि त्यो शान्तिदेवको शिक्षा समुदाय हो, शान्तिदेवको बलिचरा भन्छ होइन, शिक्षा समुदायमा तथागतगुह्यक सूत्रका धेरै उद्धरणहरू चाहिँ नि होइन त्यसमा मेन्सन भएको मैले पाएँ। तथागतगुह्यक सूत्रका मेन उद्धरणहरू। अनि गुह्य समाजमा हेर्दाखेरि त्यसको त्यो एउटा उदाहरण पनि गुह्य समाज तन्त्रमा छैन। त्यो अर्थमा मैले लास्टमा के निष्कर्ष निकालेँ भन्दाखेरि तथागतगुह्यक सूत्र र गुह्य समाज तन्त्र एउटै टेक्स्ट होइन, त्यो फरक टेक्स्ट हो। तर गुरुजहरूले किन त्यो तथागतगुह्य सूत्र को अब संस्कृतमा अभाव भएपछि अथवा त्यो हराएर गयो होला अथवा के भयो होला त्यसको सत्तामा चाहिँ किन यो गुह्यसमाज तन्त्र राख्यो भन्ने क्वेसन आफै त्यो जुन विषय छ आफैमा क्वेसन मार्क हो कि त्यो विषयमा अब उहाँहरूको चाहिँ धारमा बुझौँ होइन मेरो यो सानो एउटा मैले कता लागेको फाइन्डिङ मात्रै हो उहाँ बजराज सर पनि आउनुभयो अब टाइम धेरै नलिकन म उहाँको छोटो परिचय दिन चाहन्छु उहाँको अब यहाँ उहाँले अङ्ग्रेजीमा उहाँले लेक्चर दिनुहुन्छ तर यहाँ सबैलाई नेपालमै तपाईँले अन द स्पट केही क्रिडेन्सियलहरू उहाँको नाम चाहिँ यो अलेक्जेन्डर जेम्स ओ निल हो होइन उहाँ अब यो डिपार्टमेन्ट अफ इस्ट एसियन ल्याङ्ग्वेजेस एन्ड कल्चर एट द स्कुल अफ ओरिएन्टल एन्ड अफ्रिकन स्टडिज सर्कलमा SOAS भनिन्छ त्यसलाई युनिभर्सिटी अफ लन्डनको उहाँ एक पोस्ट डक्टरल रिसर्चर हुन्छ पोस्ट डक्टरल भनेको त्यसको अर्थ के हो भन्दाखेरि उहाँले PhD गरिसक्नुभयो उहाँको अब हेर्नुहोस् है यसो यङ हुनुहुन्छ है उहाँ त्यही पनि अब एउटा PhD गरेर मक्क परेर बसिरहेको डक्टर भइयो सकियो अब हामी अब कार्यक्रममा गएर दायसमा बस्नु पाइन्छ अन्त ठुलो सम्मान हुन्छ उहाँहरूको त्यस्तो होइन डक्टरेट त सुरुवात हो उहाँको PhD त सुरुवात हो त्यसपछि फेरि पोस्ट डक्टरेट कति गरिन्छ कति गरिन्छ होइन उहाँ एउटा पोस्ट डक्टरेट रिसर्चर हुनुहुन्छ उहाँले चाहिँ नि यो के अरे म यहाँ संक्षिप्तमा मात्रै भन्छ उहाँले हाम्रो यो गोल्डन टेम्पलमा हिरण्यवर्ध महाविहारमा र अन्य विहारहरूमा होइन हाम्रो सूत्रपाठहरू हुन्छन् होइन हाम्रो सूत्रपाठहरू हुन्छन् त्यो सूत्रपाठको बारेमा उहाँले चाहिँ PhD गर्नुभएको हो कि सूत्रपाठको बारेमा अनि उहाँ के हो 2022 हालै मात्रै उहाँले चाहिँ PhD प्राप्त गर्नुभएको हो होइन युनिभर्सिटी अफ टोरन्टोमा उहाँले PhD प्राप्त गर्नुभएको हो अनि म एउटा सानो यो घटना चाहिँ यहाँ जोड्न चाहन्छु उहाँ यो कोरोना कालभन्दा अगाडि 4 वर्ष अगाडि भनौँ उहाँ चाहिँ अब मेरो भाइ मेरो साकी उहाँले डिपार्टमेन्ट हेड हुनुहुन्छ युनिभर्सिटी अफ द वेस्ट क्यालिफोर्नियामा उहाँले चाहिँ नि मेरो भाइको रिफरेन्समा होइन अनि अब मेरो त्यहाँ उता नारायणी सिटमा पनि जानुहोस् न भनेर त्यसरी मेरो भाइले पठाएन अनि मैले केही उहाँलाई चाहिँ सानो PhD-कै उहाँको रिसर्च काममा मैले हेल्प गरेको थिएँ होइन जस्तै कि उहाँले अब यही सूत्रपाठकै सिलसिलामा होइन त्यसको इन्टरभ्यू चाहिँ मलाई दीपक गुरुलाई पनि उहाँले कन्ट्याक्ट गर्नुभयो अनि दीपक गुरुसँग यो जुन पूजा विधि छ नि सूत्रपाठ सूत्रपाठ गर्नुभन्दा पहिले हामीले त्यो स्क्रिप्चरलाई सूत्रलाई चाहिँ हामीले त्यो पूजा गर्नुपर्छ होइन त्यो विभिन्न पञ्चोपचार के कुरो सबै चाहिँ उहाँले चाहिँ त्यो इन्टरभ्यू मार्फत चाहिँ उहाँले यो दीपक गुरुजी मार्फत चाहिँ त्यो ज्ञान पाउनुभयो कि अनि दीपक गुरुजी आफै पनि इङ्ग्लिसमा नै बोल्नुभयो मैले अब इन्टरप्रेटरको लागि म गएको थिएँ होइन तर मेरो आवश्यकै परेन कि मैले अनि उहाँले त्यही छोडेर म चाहिँ अन्त हिँडेँ होइन त्यो सबै चाहिँ दीपक गुरुजीले इङ्ग्लिसमै बुझाउनु हो कि त्यसरी उहाँ चाहिँ दीपक गुरुजीप्रति एकदमै कृतज्ञ हुनुहुन्छ कि किनकि उहाँको रिसर्चको मेन प्रेरणाको स्रोत भनौँ ज्ञानको स्रोत पनि उहाँ अनि अब युनिभर्सिटी अफ टोरन्टोमा छँदा होइन उहाँले एउटा यो जोसेफ आर्म्यान बम्बार्डियर डक्टरल ग्रेजुएट स्कलरसिप पाउनुभएको थियो कि त्यो चाहिँ सोसियल एन्ड ह्युम्यानिटिज काउन्सिल अफ क्यानाडामा अन्तर्गत पर्छ होइन अनि उहाँले चाहिँ अब यो हाम्रो यो जापानमा एकदमै प्रसिद्ध एउटा संस्था छ जसले एउटा यो टिचिङ अफ बुद्ध भन्ने एउटा किताब निकालेर हाम्रो एउटा मिसनरी त नभनौँ हरेक होटेलमा चाहिँ राखेको थियो कि जम्मा अहिले 46-47 भाषामा चाहिँ त्यो अनुवाद भइसक्यो कि इङ्ग्लिसमा पोर्चुगिजमा संसारका धेरै जसो पपुलर सबै भाषामा चाहिँ चाइनिजमा होइन अनि त्यो होटेलमा राखेर अब होटेलमा त्यो त्यहाँ टुरिस्टहरूलाई चाहिँ अब होटेलमा एउटा त्यहाँ तपाईँलाई थाहा होला होटेलमा चाहिँ त्यहाँ अब वेस्टर्नहरूको होटेलमा एउटा बाइबल पनि हुन्छ कि त्यो बाइबल जस्तै त्यो एउटा किताब पनि राखेर होइन त्यो किनकि होटेलमा त्यहाँ रात बिताउनेहरूले त त्यो पढ्छन् नि होइन त्यसरी चाहिँ बुद्ध धर्मको प्रचार प्रसार त्यसरी होस् भनेर त्यसरी चाहिँ त्यो पब्लिस गरेको थियो कि बुक्यो क्युकाई त्यही क्युकाई बुक्यो क्युकाई क्यानाडा ग्रेजुएट स्कलरसिप पनि उहाँले पाउनुभएको थियो कि अनि उहाँले चाहिँ अब टाइसिटी युनिभर्सिटी अफ जापान इन टोकियो होइन टोकियोमा चाहिँ रिसर्च फेलोसिप अन गरेर उहाँले त्यहाँ स्टडी गर्नुभयो अनि यो सबै कुरा त उहाँले पनि भन्नुहुन्छ होइन तर उहाँको अलिकति म विशेषता मात्रै भन्न चाहन्छु यहाँ उहाँले यो जुन हाम्रो नवसूत्र सङ्ग्रहमा यो अहिले यो रिप्लेस भएको छ है गुह्य समाज तन्त्र नवसूत्र सङ्ग्रहमा तथागत सूत्रको रिप्लेसमेन्टमा चाहिँ अहिले आएको छ गुह्य समाज तन्त्र नवसूत्र सङ्ग्रह भनेर त्यो एउटा टेक्स्टलाई पनि खुला गर्छु होइन तर गुह्य समाज तन्त्र नै पास भएको चाहिँ यहाँ हामीले देख्दा छ तर जे होस् उहाँको चाहिँ एउटा थमै भनौँ कि उहाँको डिस्कभरी भनौँ कि होइन त्यो भनौँ अब उहाँको अब एउटा पोस्टुलेसन भनौँ प्रपोजल भनौँ अब तथागत गुह्य सूत्र हराएको छैन संसारमा होइन भलै यो संस्कृतमा चाहिँ छैन अहिले उपलब्ध छैन होइन त्यो आफ्नो ठाउँमा छँदैछ तर संस्कृतमा उपलब्ध छैन भन्दैमा चाहिँ यसको ट्रान्सलेसन त त्यहाँ चाइनामा तिब्बतमा चाहिँ अहिले अझसम्म पनि अद्यापि पनि त्यसको प्रिजर्भेसन चाहिँ भइरहेछ होइन तर अनुवाद गर्न बाँकी छ तर उहाँले छ नि उहाँले यो तथागत गुह्य सूत्र हाम्रो यो 9 सूत्रमा पर्ने एउटा सूत्रलाई यो चाइनिज भाषाबाट डाइरेक्टली अङ्ग्रेजी भाषामा अनुवाद गर्नुभएको छ डाइरेक्टली क्लासिकल चाइनिज भाषा के अनि उहाँको एउटा के हो यो टेक्स्टलाई चाहिँ संस्कृतमा हामीले फेरि पुनरुद्धार रिस्टोरेसन गर्न सक्यो भने किन अब गुह्य समाज तन्त्रको ठाउँमा चाहिँ अब यही तथागत गुह्य सूत्रलाई नै किन नराख्ने भन्ने त्यो छ कि किनकि अब त्यो सूत्र वैपुल्य सूत्रमा चाहिँ यो तन्त्र हो तन्त्रको त्यहाँ ठ्याक्कै खासै यो औचित्य चाहिँ देखिँदैन जस्तो लाग्छ होइन त्यसमा वैपुल्य भनेको मैले अघि भनिहालेँ नि होइन द्वादशाङ्ग बुद्ध वचनमा वैपुल्य भन्ने बित्तिकै त्यो चाहिँ बोधिसत्वका एक्टिभिटीहरूको व्याख्या शून्यताको जुन ज्ञान छ नि त्यसको व्याख्या होइन त्यो सम्बन्धी व्याख्या गरिएको टेक्स्टलाई चाहिँ यहाँ वैपुल्य भनिन्छ द्वादशाङ्ग बुद्ध वचनबाट एउटामा पर्छ त्यसको ठाउँमा यही राखिदियो नि त के हो भने उहाँको चाहिँ एउटा प्रपोजल भनौँ त्यसलाई चाहिँ अब हामी विचार विमर्श गर्ने आफ्नो ठाउँमा थालेछ त्यही भएर अब उहाँको अन्य परिचय उहाँ आफैले दिनुहुन्छ होइन यो लेक्चरको दौरानमा पनि तपाईँले पनि थाहा पाउनुहुन्छ अब मैले धेरै समय लग्यो होइन अहिले उहाँलाई नै हामी यसलाई यो प्रेजेन्टेसनलाई ह्यान्डल गर्न पनि प्रेजेन्टेसन गर्न पनि धेरै परिचयका शब्दहरू दिन चाहन्छु हौ त्यो सर्वप्रथम
Thank you. Thank you, Newar, for your introduction over here. Yes, and I'd like to also thank the founder of the college, Maheshwar Bhattacharya and PM Chitrakar, and also Sunita Bhattacharya, the principal of the college, and Milan Shakya for proposing this idea. And of course all of the other lecturers, researchers, and students of the college. Thank you so much for having me here at Sugata College. Yes, so this lecture or this talk is on the Tathagataguhya Sutra, which in English the title is translated as "The Secrets of the Tathagata." So this is the outline of the presentation. First, I'll give a little bit of background and discussion of my interest in this sutra. Why study this sutra? Why translate this sutra? And then some historical contextualization. This will also become relevant in the Nepalese context. You'll be able to see how it connects to Newar Buddhism. And then I'll go do an overview of some of both the traditional Buddhist scholarship. Milan already mentioned some of it, for example, Shantideva's references to the sutra, but also some of the contemporary academic scholarship, most of which is in Japanese. And then I will do a bit of an overview of some of the characters in the sutra, including Vajrapani, because he's actually the main interlocutor, the main discussant in the sutra, and that's where one of the names of the sutra comes from, and I'll go over that later. and then I'll discuss some of the literary features of the sutra, and then some of the doctrinal and ritual characteristics, which I think is really the core of this presentation. I think people might want to know, what does the Tathagataguhya actually teach, rather than maybe what are the literary characteristics. But and then some of the thematic characteristics, the core message, and a narrative outline, and some example narratives. So one of the things which I find is lovely about the sutra actually are the narratives, the stories. They're very interesting and actually quite humorous stories in the sutra. And for those of you who have read the Dharma Pundarika, you'll also remember that narratives and analogies and parables are one of the highlights of the Dharma Pundarika. So many of you may be familiar, for example, with the parable of the burning house, which is a parable that indicates the teaching of Ekayana, one vehicle. And there are many such interesting parables and stories in the Tathagataguhya. Okay. Oh yes, and I just also wanted to say that I won't have full citations in this presentation. They're in the PDF, which is also freely available online, and I can point people to that later. So now for the background. As I think Milan also just contextualized, this is one of the major and one of the most often cited sutras in Indo-Nepalese Buddhism, both in India and in Nepal. And parts of it form part of the exoteric Dharma Mandala in Newar Buddhism. So what's meant by that, by exoteric, is it's not secret. So there is a secret Guhya. There is a secret Dharma Mandala, but eventually, as we know, there are very few manuscripts of the Guhyasamaja, and there's only one that's been documented, which is in the Calcutta Asiatic Society Library, and so it seems that at some point it was replaced with the esoteric Guhyasamaja Tantra in Nepal. And yeah, there seems to be no better explanation than that the name is similar, although there are some interesting thematic similarities, such as the secret of the body, speech, and mind of the Tathagata. Okay, so yes, there is one fragmentary Sanskrit manuscript, which has a diplomatic edition by Santo, and I'll mention that a bit later. And then, so why did I translate the Chinese and not the Tibetan? Because there is a Tibetan translation. Well, it's very simple. I don't read Tibetan. And so the other thing is to use free time. So at the end of the day, when you're done your work, what do? Do you watch television, watch movies, browse Facebook or YouTube? Well, I decided, well, why should I waste my time doing something like that? Why don't I spend it studying the Dharma? So I developed this habit, which sometimes gets a bit out of hand, of translating sutras, and I have this vision of developing the English language Buddhist canon, and trying to at least allow English speakers to see what is in the Buddhist canon, in particular the Mahayana Buddhist canon. Almost all of the Pali Tipitaka, except for the commentaries, almost all of the Pali Tipitaka is translated into English. But we still have a lot of work to do with the Mahayana Sutras. And I was also doing this Buddhist Sutra reading group, which is still ongoing. And we were reading through the Nava Sutra. But we couldn't complete it until we had the Tathagataguhya. So this was a desideratum, this was a necessity for completing that reading group. And we'll do that next year. And if anyone's interested in participating, it's all in English, but if anyone's interested in participating, it would be by Zoom, and you're more than welcome to join. We'll discuss the sutra. So also, this is a non-academic translation. So I published it under my Dharma name, Shakushingan, which is a Dharma name that I received in Japan, in the Pure Land Buddhist tradition. And there are a lot of reasons why I did that. One of them is essentially everything that that I'm doing under my secular name is essentially academic-oriented, trying to make it peer-reviewed. But I realize that if I publish under my given name and try to do a peer-reviewed publication with some publishing house, it's going to take years, and I actually needed this now, right away. So I decided to translate it from the Chinese and self-publish it. And so Shakushingen translates to Pranidhana Chitta Shakya. It's a Buddhist name. And so I compared there are two Chinese translations. Taisho, stands for Taisho. This is the Chinese Buddhist canon. And T310, this version of the Tathagataguhya exists in Tibetan, and this is the Maharatnakuta collection, Maharatnakuta. And T312 is an independent translation, separate from the Maharatnakuta collection, and this corresponds this is also very close to the Tibetan translation, and also it's very close to the Sanskrit. Sorry, this line that I extended. There are mantras or vidya, dharani, in the sutra. They are close to the Chinese is quite close to the existing, the extant Sanskrit, but the Tibetan is a bit different. So I'm not sure what happened there, but that's something for someone working on the Tibetan to sort out. What are the names of the sutra? It's the Tathagataguhya Sutra is, I think, the easiest short name, but it's popularly known as the Tathagataguhyaka Sutra, and people often refer to it as that. I would say that the correct name is actually Tathagataguhya, because Guhyaka is actually not the same as Guhya. Guhyaka is a kind of creature, like a yaksha, and it actually is the creature which Vajrapani is the lord over. So he's actually a Guhyaka Adipati. He is the lord Adipati of the Guhyakas, and they are in the sutra. But what the Guhya is referring to is actually the Guhya of the Tathagata. So it's actually the secrets of the Tathagata, secret of the body, secret of speech, and secret of mind. And the full title is Tathagata Achintya Guhya Nirdesha, Instruction on the Inconceivable Secrets of the Tathagata. And in the Mahayana Sutra Alankara, it's referred to as the Guhyakadipati Nirdesha, the instruction of the Lord of Mysteries, or Guhyakas. And in the Maharatnakuta, it's called the section on Vajrapani, or the assembly of Vajrapani. And every assembly, every section in the Maharatnakuta, it takes its title from the interlocutor, the discussant of the section, usually. So, this is the first version. The Maharatnakuta version dates to the 3rd century. It was translated by someone called Dharma Raksha. And then the Tibetan translation dates to the 9th century. And then the second translation is also by another person called Dharma Raksha. And this is from the Sung dynasty. And this is very close to the dating of the Sanskrit manuscript. And it's also close to the Tibetan translation. And the Nepalese manuscript is the extant manuscript is Nepalese, but it's in the Asiatic Society in Calcutta. But the chapters, I don't have time to go into the details of what the Sanskrit manuscript looks like, but in the second edition of the translation, every folio number is given, and you'll be able to very easily see that actually the ordering of the folios is very mixed up, and we know the correct ordering of the sutra because all of the two Chinese versions agree in terms of the structure, and the Tibetan agrees in terms of the structure. So something happened with the Sanskrit manuscript. Something bad happened before it was copied to whatever the scribe was copying it from. And it's really unfortunate that happened, but it does help us in reconstructing some things, such as some names in the sutra. So what's the scholarship on the sutra like? So in terms of actual other Mahayana sutras, refer, we would say, intertextually. Other Mahayana sutras refer to the Tathagataguhya. So, for example, in the Lankavatara Sutra, wherein the Buddha is depicted suggesting that in his speech he does not utter a single word. This is from chapter 8 of the Tathagataguhya. And this is again referred to later in the Lankavatara, along with a line of questioning about why Vajrapani always accompanies all Tathagatas. This is a claim made in chapter 10. It's also made in the first chapter of the Tathagataguhya, but it's made in chapter 10. And these are the page numbers versus D.T. Suzuki's English translation, so it's easy to find. Ikuma is a researcher at Taisho University, and he showed that there are narrative and doctrinal parallels to a sutra called the Pravara Deva Raja Paripracha. And he also looking at this, it looks like the Pravara Deva Raja Paripracha is borrowing from the Tathagataguhya. This is not a popular sutra, though. Very few people have ever heard about this sutra, but it's interesting. And then in this sutra, Mara is rebuked using a verse. It's a very beautiful verse, very beautiful, and it's in the Lalita Vistara, and it's exactly parallel, which is what you would expect if it's trying to give an account of what the Buddha actually said at the time. But it seems like the Lalita Vistara, at least in terms of the development of the sutra and in terms of the redaction of the sutra, is earlier, and so it seems like that could be the reference from the academic perspective. Okay, in terms of traditional scholarship, as Mila mentioned, it's heavily relied upon by Indian commentators. So this is, of course, the Mahapragya Paramita Shastra is preserved in Chinese as well, and it's attributed to Nagarjuna, and it focuses on the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, with some references to it there. In the Mahayana Sutra Alankara Bhasha, Vasubandhi refers to it, and focuses on the Buddha's 60 kinds of speech. And in the later versions of the Tathagataguhya, such as the one I translated, there are actually 64 kinds of speech of the Tathagata. But in the earlier versions, there are 60 kinds of speech. And Chandrakirti refers to it in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and he discusses calming and sense objects in the Buddha's speech. And Shantideva discusses it in his Shiksha Samuchaya, in terms of using references to bodhicitta, the bodhisattva's speech, manifesting good qualities, and the bodhisattva's path. And Pragya Karamati refers to it in the Bodhicharyavatara Panjika, regarding the bodhisattva's speech. So the secret of the speech of the Tathagata and the bodhisattva is one of the most popular teachings of this sutra, and I'll discuss that later. And Kamalashila discusses it in his Bhavanakrama and in his Tattva Sangraha. Again, on the Tathagata's speech. It's a very, very popular point. I suppose it's a very witty point that it makes, and I'll give the quotation later. So probably this is what most of you are most familiar with if you've participated, for example, in Ashtami Vrata or other vratas. You will hear the Mula Guru reciting the names of the parts of the Dharma Mandala, and it's made up of the Nava Sutra, Nava Grantha, and there is an earlier set in the Guhyasamaja, which is made up of tantras, and this set precedes Acharya Abhisheka. So in order to undergo Acharya Abhisheka, Jagadarpana suggested that the candidate undertake Poshada, undertake the Vrata. So they have the 8 precepts when they take Abhisheka. And so there is a esoteric Dharma Mandala. This is the exoteric, the non-secret. It's open. So exoteric means open, esoteric with an S means secret. So the open one is made up of these 9 sutras: Pragya Paramita, Samadhi Raja, Lalita Vistara, Lankavatara, Sabrana Prabhasa, Gandhavyuha, Dharma Pradavika, Dashabhumika, and Tathagataguhya. This is the most popular form of the mandala today. And actually, if you look at ritual manuals from the 19th century, 18th century, it changes over time. At one point, the Namasangiti was in there, and at one point, the Pancharaksha were also in there. So this is something which changes. But when this form was cemented, the Tathagataguhya probably still existed in Nepal, and it was probably this Mahayana Sutra. And the reason why that's so, why it's not the Guhyasamaja, is because it's for Poshada, for non-Vajracharyas. It's for the lay people. It's for people who are not undergoing Acharya Abhisheka. So for there to be a secret esoteric tantra in that mandala wouldn't make a lot of sense. So that's why there are open sutras that anybody can read, anybody can study in the Dharma mandala. In terms of Western scholarship, Lamott has a comprehensive study of Vajrapani, and I think he actually has the best study of Vajrapani out there. It's very, very thorough. He makes an interesting claim. He says it places the humble yaksha Vajrapani on the same footing as the great god Brahma. We are not told either when or how he will one day attain supreme enlightenment. And this was interesting because it's not true. The sutra actually has a very interesting narrative, which I will tell you in a bit, about how Vajrapani will one day attain Buddhahood, and how and when, and also how his sons will attain Buddhahood. And Radich says that the sutra has some docetism. And I put an exclamation mark there because it's not some docetism, it's completely docetic. And so docetism means that the body that you see is not made of flesh and blood. It's like a projection. So the sutra is teaching that when the Buddha appears in the world, he is not born like you and I, through causes and conditions, through hetu pratyaya. He's not born through afflictions, through klesha. Why are we born? According to Mahayana Buddhism, it's because we are ignorant, we are afflicted. So the Buddha can't be like us. So the Buddha is a projection from the Dharmakaya, from the Dharma body. And in Christianity, the term docetism is a heresy, because they believe that Jesus has to have actually been in flesh and blood in order to be sacrificed for the sins of mankind. So in Christianity, docetism is kind of a bad word because it's what you're not supposed to believe. But Mahayana Buddhism teaches that the Buddha is a projection. And it does that the doctrine that the knowledge of the Buddha is present in the body of all beings. So this is something which I'll discuss a bit later, but this is a proto-Tathagatagarpa teaching. That in fact that the body of the Buddha is within your body. And the knowledge of the Buddha is within your body. And it also has some interesting parallels to the Mahayana Nirvana Sutra. And Hamano also discusses how the Tathagataguhya is the source of a lot of Tathagatagarpa teachings. For example, in the Ratnagotra Vibhaga. And Ikuma has these 4 articles which discuss the connections between this sutra and other sutras. So, for example, the Lalita Vistara and the Pravaradeva Raja Parivrajya. Now he suggests that because the Sanskrit and the Maharatnakuta version have a lot of Gandharan place names, that the origin of the sutra was in the northwest of India or in Gandhara. But actually those names are absent in the later Dharmaraksha translation. So I'm not sure if that's the case. These are very difficult things to make. So who is Vajrapani? Vajrapani is also called Guhyakadipati, which means the Lord Master of the Guhyakas. And a Guhyaka is a kind of yaksha. And he's also, another interpretation is that he's the Lord of the secrets of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. Because in many sutras where he occurs, the secrets of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind are a theme. So there's an interesting thematic thing which comes up here. He appears as a forceful aid to the Buddha's instruction in the Agamas and as a manifestation of the Buddha in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. I can discuss that later if anyone's interested. And then he protected the Buddha from Devadatta's boulder. So Devadatta tried to kill the Buddha many times. And when when Devadatta tried to roll a boulder onto the Buddha, it's said that Vajrapani stopped the boulder, moved the boulder. And he also subdued a Naga Raja called Abalal. And his many appearances, and usually blue holding a Vajra and lotus. The cover that I used for the publication and also for this presentation has a very peaceful form of Vajrapani with blue skin, and he's holding a lotus. Of course, many of you are probably more familiar with the wrathful form of Vajrapani. So in this sutra, he teaches on the 3 secrets of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind on request. He always accompanies Maitreya and all Buddhas of the Vajrakalpa. So every Buddha in this Kalpa, Vajrakalpa, he accompanies them. He's always attending them. And even when he's attending Shakyamuni Buddha, he's also attending Maitreya Bodhisattva because he's the future Buddha. And he has this infinite ability to manifest 8 beings. So he can be anywhere at any time. And in his present life, he lives in a palace in the wilderness, occupied by thousands of yakshas and other creatures. And there's a very exciting section of the sutra where the Vajrapani invites the Buddha and the Sangha to his palace, and he creates a magnificent magical feast using supernormal powers. And he has 500 sons. The eldest of whom is Vajrasena, the second of whom is Subahu. Both sons possess great supernormal power. At the end of the Vajrakalpa, this is how he will attain Buddhahood. At the end of the Vajrakalpa, a Vajrapani will be born in Akshobhya's land. After learning hundreds of mudras, he will attain great realization. Later, attending upon countless Buddhas, he will eventually attain Buddhahood as a Vajravikraman Tathagata in a gloriously adorned world called Samanta Parishuddha. This sutra perpetuates his identity as someone who can display great strength and use supernormal power to edify beings, notably illustrated by the episode in which various members of the audience of the discourse attempt to lift his Vajramallet to no avail. This is a very interesting story. Ajatashatru, the king Ajatashatru, he attempts to lift the Vajra of Vajrapani, and he's trying, and he can't lift it. And he says to the Tathagata, to Shakyamuni Buddha, Shakyamuni Tathagata, when I'm in battle, I can lift a war elephant above my head, spin it around 3 times, and throw it at the enemy, killing them all. How is it that I can't lift this tiny little Vajra? And then the next person tries. Indra tries, and then Brahma tries, and they keep trying, and then Mahamagalyayana tries, because of course Mahamagalyayana should be able to lift it. He has supernormal powers, but he also tries and he can't. And the Buddha reveals that in fact only Vajrapani can lift this, and this is in order to reduce pride. So as a teaching to reduce pride. So this thing is set up just so that when the Tathagataguhya Sutra is taught, all of the devas and all of the Shravakas will have their pride destroyed, and they will be humbled. So here are some depictions. You're probably in Nepal. You're probably most familiar with this appearance of Vajrapani, but one of the earliest appearances is actually it's been identified as being a parallel to Hercules. And this is in Gandhara, because he always accompanies the Buddha, and this is in the Greek style. And this is from the Panchen Lama's collection. This is in the Rubin Museum, and it's entitled Vajrapani. So that's how we know it's probably Vajrapani. But maybe it's not. If anyone has any other ideas, we can talk about it later. Characters. So Shantamati. Shantamati is an important character in the sutra, and he appears as a foil to Vajrapani in the mantra Shriya Mulakalpa. So you're probably more familiar with the title Manjushri Mulakalpa. There's a scholar who recently has shown that the correct title is probably Manjushriya Mulakalpa. And in this, also Shantamati and Vajrapani, they also have this relationship of questioning one another. And so he takes on that identity here. So it seems like Shantamati Bodhisattva and Vajrapani Bodhisattva come together. They are like, foils to one another. He's listed in several sutras as a bodhisattva in the Buddhist assembly. His name appears as the Devaputra in the Lalita Vistara. And of course we know Mahamad Galyayana, right? He's prompted by Maitreya to seek the limit of the Tathagata's voice, only to find at great pains that it is unlimited. So this is a very interesting story. So I'll talk a little bit later about what is the secret of the Tathagata's speech, because it's very interesting. But this is a very interesting story. The Buddha teaches that the Tathagata's voice is unlimited. And then Maitreya has an interesting idea. What can I do to enhance this teaching even more? What if I put the idea into Mahamad Galyayana's head, that you can test the limits of the Tathagata's speech? And so Maitreya puts this idea into Mahamad Galyayana's mind. And Mahamad Galyayana then thinks, oh, what if I were to test the limits of the Tathagata's speech? And so then he receives the supernormal power of the Buddha, because the Buddha is using this as a teaching technique. And then he flies to the other side of Mount Meru, and he listens for the Buddha's speech. And he hears it just as if he were one arm length away, as if you were right in front of him still. And then he flies to the edge of the world. At the edge of the world, there's a ring of iron mountains in the traditional cosmology. And so he goes to the other side of the ring of iron mountains, and he listens, and he hears the Buddha as if he's just one arm breadth away. Oh my gosh, the speech really reaches a long way. What if I were to go, an ayuta of koti of yojanas in the western direction, and he goes past Buddha lands more numerous than the grains of sand in as many Ganges rivers as there are in a koti of niyuta of Trisahasra, Mahasihasra, Lokadatu. And on the other side, he gets to a Buddha land where the Buddha is massive. He's many yojanas tall, and all of the bhikshus are doing their alms round. They're collecting the food on an alms round, and they're also many yojanas tall. And he's just a little monk, like an insect there. And he said, "Oh my goodness, they're on an alms round," and so he starts following them, and because he wants to find the Buddha of that land to see if he can meet him, and the monks, they then see him and they start mocking him, and they say, "Oh, look at this little monk! Why is he following us on an alms round?" And then they get to the Buddha and of that land, and that Buddha says, "You should not mock this monk. This is one of the foremost monks of Shakyamuni Tathagata. And Shakyamuni Tathagata, he has done the most difficult thing, which is to attain Buddhahood in the Saha world, where there are the 5 kashayas, the 5 degeneracies, degeneracy of kalpa, degeneracy of lifespan, etc. And whereas in their land everything is pure, it's very easy to attain Buddhahood. And so then Mahamad Galyayana says to that Buddha, "I've come all this way to hear if there is a limit to the speech of Shakyamuni Tathagata." And then he listens, and he hears Shakyamuni Tathagata's voice as if he were only one arm breadth away. So, oh my goodness! And then he's invited by that Buddha to show his supernormal powers to all of the bhikshus there, and then they're all impressed and they all worship him. And then he wants to find a way back, and he realizes, oh, I got here by the power of the Buddha, but how do I get back to Jambudvipa? And then he's crying and he's wailing and he's trying his best to get back, and he's given the supernormal power of that Buddha in that land to see all the way to Jambudvipa. And he looks in that direction and he prays and he says, "Oh, can I please go back? Please let me go back." And all the way back on Jambudvipa on Gurdakruta, Parvata, Mount Vulture's Peak on the top. All the assembly is there, and they listen and they hear a wailing, "Ah, help, from really far away. And Ananda says to the Buddha, "What is that wailing?" And the Buddha says, "That is Mahamagalyayana. He dared to test the limits of the Tathagata's speech." And so then he sends a beam of light all the way in the western direction, and Mahamagalyayana instantly appears right there. And he repents and he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I will never try to test the limits of the Tathagata's speech again." So the teaching is the Tathagata's speech is unlimited. Yeah, this is one of the best stories in the sutra. Ajatashatru, he also is very important. He asks how Vajrapani gained his merits, and makes an intertextual reference to this other very interesting sutra called the Ajatashatru Putra Vinodana Sutra. The sutra on the destruction of Ajatashatru's guilt at killing his father. And in that sutra, Ajatashatru overcomes his kaukrutya, his guilt or his remorse, because he realizes emptiness. He's taught a teaching on shunyata by Manjushri. The literary features. So there are lots of stories, theatrical stories like the one I just told you. One of them, Suryoga, is a bodhisattva who removed people's sickness by allowing them to feast on his flesh. So there was a famine and pestilence in one land, and people were very hungry and also they had lots of illnesses. And just by eating Suryoga's flesh, this bodhisattva's flesh, they were able to be cured of their illnesses. But every time they ate of his flesh, the flesh grew back. So there's also some stories in the Abhidamas like this. And Jivaka's medicinal woman. So there's a story which is about also the bodhisattva's body. What is the bodhisattva's body like? It's like this one time Jivaka, the king of doctors, I think most of you know who Jivaka is, right? He created a woman out of medicines, and then she was able to move and walk like a robot. It's like a robot doctor, robot nurse. But because she has medicines, every time people go in contact with her, they get cured. So the bodhisattva is just like that. Wherever the bodhisattva is, they are cured of their illnesses. A bodhisattva being able to count all the leaves of a Nirodha tree without looking at it. So once the bodhisattva was a Brahmin, and he was just walking down the street reciting the Rig Veda, and there was another Brahmin sitting beneath a tree, and this Brahmin decided to make it his hobby to count the number of leaves on the tree using the old, very, very complicated Indian counting system. So there's hundreds of different kinds of units. And so he knew that he spent years counting and learning how to count the number of leaves on this tree in every kind of unit. And so when this Brahmin walked by, he said to him, "Oh, hey, I have a question for you," because he was very proud that he knew the number of leaves on this tree. "Do you want to guess how many leaves are on this tree?" And this bodhisattva was walking by and said, "Oh yes, yeah, I know it." And then he recites the number of leaves on the tree in verse. And then he said, "Oh my goodness, that's amazing. How do you know that?" He said, "Well, because I'm a bodhisattva." And the secret of the bodhisattva's mind is such that he knows these sorts of things. And there's this great story of the Chakravartin Dhritarashtra. This is the story where all of the Buddhas of the Bhadrakalpa received their prediction. So Dhritarashtra was a king, a Chakravartin, and he loved to listen to the Dharma, and he built a tower which could fly, so kind of like a rocket, and everyone in his palace would go into this tower, and it would fly like this, and then land in the city where the Buddha was, in the Buddhist garden, and they would all listen to the teaching of the Buddha. And then one day, he had two sons. He had two courtiers, the two most beautiful courtiers, and they went into the palace gardens, and they were playing splashing in the water, doing water play is it called Jala Krida or something, in the water, and they were just relaxing. And then they decide to relax by the side of the water and cool off. And then magically, two babies appear in their lap. Bung, bung, and they look up and they say, "Hello, mommy, I'm your new child." And then, so these two are the last two sons of Dhritarashtra. And then they have a great desire to hear the Dharma. So they tell their father, Dhritarashtra Chakravartin, Daddy, can we go to see the Buddha? And they go to see the Buddha, and the Buddha tells them, he tells Dhritarashtra how to find out the order in which his sons will attain enlightenment. And he says, you have to build a jeweled vase, like kalasha, and put it on a jeweled pedestal. And then you will go up and take the names of every one of your sons out, and the order in which you take them out will be the order in which they attain Buddhahood. And the last two sons, one of them will be Vajrapani. One of these magically arisen sons will be Vajrapani, and the other one will be Shikin Brahma, and he will also attain Buddhahood in the future. Okay, so we already gave you this story, Mahagala, and then the life of the Buddha is related from the perspective of Vajrapani. Vajrapani always accompanies the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas, so he has the first-hand knowledge of the life of the Buddha. So he gives the life of the Buddha, and then Vajrapani, as I mentioned before, he also invites the Buddha and the Sangha to his place in the wilderness. This is an artist's depiction of Dhritarashtra's tower, which flew through the air, and I guess in here is all of the courtiers who flew. Literary features. I'll pass over this just so we can get to the doctrinal features. But there is an interesting structure, a parallelism structure. So these kinds of parallelisms and chiasmus, these kinds of literary structures, were probably useful for oral recitation and memorization. So when there's presence of these, there's a lot of interest as to why sutras have these kinds of structures. And so there is a structure in this sutra. So we have, I'll just quickly go over. We have Secrets of the Bodhisattva's Body, Chapter 1. Secrets of the Bodhisattva's Speech, Chapter 2. Then Praise of Vajrapani, Cause of his abilities. So Secrets of the Bodhisattva's Mind, Chapter 3. Then a Praise of Vajrapani and an account of the way to awakening. Then we have the Secrets of the Tathagata's Body, Chapter 7. Secrets of the Tathagata's Speech, Chapter 8. Then Secret of the Tathagata's Mind, Chapter 9. Then again a Praise of Vajrapani, Causes of the Buddha's Awakening, and Fulfillment of the Bodhisattva Path. So here we have, what is it that a Bodhisattva has to do? And then here we have the fulfillment. So, and also Bodhisattva is cause, Buddha is effect. So there's a very deep meaning to the structure of the sutra. Okay, what are some of the doctrinal features? Revelation. I'll pass over this a bit quickly so we can get to the more deeper aspects, but this is very interesting. That revelation, in terms of prediction of future Buddhahood, is a very big theme in the sutra, and of course in many other sutras. But also the idea that the ability to understand or practice the Dharma can only be done if you have because of the superior wisdom possessed by all Tathagatas, which dwells in the body of all beings. So the idea is that if you attain anything through the practice of the Dharma, it's because the body or the mind of the Tathagata actually dwells within your body. So there's a kind of implication of other power, that the Tathagata is using his power to aid you, but also this idea of Buddha nature, Buddha Dhatu or Tathagata Garbha, which acts, and that there's nothing on the part of ordinary beings that can allow them to attain awakening. So while it might seem like a bodhisattva is performing activities to attain Buddhahood, in fact he's actualizing the body and the speech and the mind of the Buddha, which is actually already within his body. And this is something which is even in Chapter 1, at the end of Chapter 1 of the sutra. Prediction is a very important part of the sutra, so predictions of Buddhahood, and reminders that predictions are also nothing to be attained, since everything is like a dream. So even though there are predictions to Buddhahood, those who are predicted to Buddhahood have already, by their inherent nature, they already have the Tathagata's body, speech, and mind in their body. So when they attain Buddhahood, they will realize that actually they had been the Tathagata the whole time. and perpetual recurrence. So this is the idea that things repeat infinite loops. So Vajrapani, he follows all Buddhas. And the grass-cutter swastika in the Lalita Vistra, the swastika he gives the Buddha, his grass, he actually gives grass to every Buddha in the Vajrakalpa. So people repeat these deeds life after life after life. And then what are some of the ritual and doctrinal characteristics? So one of them is dharnis. So dharani on the one, dharani according to the Shastras has, or Yogacara Bhimi Shastra, there are 4 kinds of dharani. One of them is simply memorization. So if you can perfectly memorize a sutra, you have a dharani. But another is this kind of formula, mnemonic formula. And so there's a chapter, the dharani door of entry to the characteristics of all dharmas. And and this dharani is characterized by the letter a. So while bearing knowledge, it also has incantory power, affected by bearing the knowledge, that is the ability to achieve all actions everywhere, since it accords with the arising of verbal action. So this is very similar to Kukai's meaning of the word hum. He has teaching on this. So Oz is very, very profound because it's also a negation. And it's also the first sound in the syllabary. It's the king of letters, you could say. And then vidyas. Vidyas have multiple functions in the sutra. One of them is to invite deities. So vidya is like a mantra or dharani. It's just a different term for a mantra. But has some different significances as well. Another one is to restrain. So vidya can be used to restrain a naga, for example. If there's a naughty naga like Apalala, you can use a vidya to restrain the naga. And also to bind beings like Mara and Nagaraja Apalala. So Mara is bound. Mara is kind of tamed because of vidya, using mantras. And they also protect the Dharma and accumulate merits. And they're present. They're not present in the earlier version. They're not present in the Mahavajrapani. So in terms of whether a lot of people discuss that, a lot of people are interested in this topic of lay and monastic Mahayana. Well, this sutra actually emphasizes the monastic aspect. It says that the best way to repay the Tathagata's kindness is to become a bhikshu and to be a monastic bodhisattva. What that means in practice, as we know in Nepal, is flexible, perhaps. I'm not sure. There are female manifestations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but actually there are no female interlocutors, unfortunately. And there's also no dichotomy between Chaitya and book worship that we find, for example, in the Ashtasahasrika. So for those of you who know the Ashtasahasrika Pragyaparamita, the 3rd Parivarta, 3rd chapter, discusses the book as the true Chaitya, the Chaitya Buddha. And there's no references to book worship. So although it's one of the Navagranta and it's worshipped as one of the Navagranta, it's not one of the sutras that particularly emphasizes book worship. Core message. What is the core message of the sutra? So this is in short what the sutra teaches. Essentially, it's that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas create infinite manifestations. Manifestation is nirmana, projection or appearance, through their body, speech, and mind. However, they do not give rise to any intention or calculation in doing this. So the Buddha doesn't wake up one day and think, I think I'm going to project a Nirmanakaya today. Or, I think I'm going to create a Pure Line today. No, it's actually just the nature of the Buddha to manifest a Nirmanakaya or Sambhogakaya without giving rise to intention or calculation. They don't think, how many beings are in the world? There's so many trillions, so many quadrillions. Okay, I'm going to liberate this many beings on this day and that day and so forth. No, because the Bodhisattva vow is actually beings are infinite. I vow to liberate them all. So there's no calculation. There's no limitation created. It is the karmic winds of beings' mental inclinations that waft the instructive nature of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, and it brings minds, it is beings' minds that give rise to the manifestations. So what this is saying is that imagine there are floating instruments, right, in the sky, and the wind wafts the instruments. It's the wind that plays the sound that results. So if there's a wind chime, a bell, and the wind blows it, and it makes a noise, it's the wind that's making the noise, but it's also in the inherent nature of the chime to make the noise. So it's the same with bodhisattvas and Buddhas. It's the nature of Buddhas and bodhisattvas to teach the Dharma and to manifest the Dharma, but it's the minds of beings that facilitate their ability to teach. If there were no deluded sentient beings, there would be no need for there to be Buddhas and bodhisattvas teaching in the world. So there needs to be, if everyone was a Buddha, then it would all be Dharmakaya, it would all be Tathata, all suchness. But because we are deluded, the Buddha manifests as Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and so forth. And then the other aspect of this is that there's nothing on the part of samsaric beings that can enable them to attain awakening. All understanding and attainment is entirely due to the Buddha's power. So this is very profound. This teaching is, as I think you all know by now, is divided into the secret of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. And so the former, the secret of the Buddha's body, is characterized as being identical to the latter. The Bodhisattva's secret of the Bodhisattva's body, speech, and mind is fundamentally identical to the Tathagata's body, speech, and mind. The actual work of cultivation, that is, how does a Bodhisattva become a Buddha? The actual work of cultivation is realizing that the practice of the Bodhisattva's body, speech, and mind is the secret of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. Thus, the arousal of bodhicitta affects the purity of body, speech, and mind. So bodhicitta is like bodhicitta is something which kind of activates this innate potential. This is not to say that bodhicitta is the end of the path. So just by arousing bodhicitta, one does not instantly become a Buddha. And the sutra also doesn't teach instantaneous awakening. It's simply that bodhicitta renders one this should be non-retrogressing from Buddhahood. That means you're avinivartika. That means you're not falling back. You're only going forward. It's like if you roll a ball down a hill, the ball cannot go up the hill. The ball has to go down the hill. So it's the same. Once the bodhisattva gives rise to bodhicitta, it doesn't matter how long. Maybe it takes kalpas and kalpas and kalpas. Eventually, they will become a Buddha. It would take a long time. This purity shines through beings' originally impure nature. I won't go into Tanlawan's analogy of wood and fire, but it's also very interesting. What is the secret of the Bodhisattva's body? The secret of the Bodhisattva's body is attained after investigation of and attaining to the Dharma body. After so investigating and attaining the Dharma body, which is unconditioned and equal to emptiness and all beings, a Bodhisattva's body becomes infinite and unlimited and can inexhaustibly take on any form to benefit beings. Merely associating with the body of a Bodhisattva can end suffering, and they can give their own flesh to benefit beings without being diminished in any way. And then the core message is the secret of the Buddha's body, that it is of the core message of the secret of the Buddha's body is that it is of the same nature as the Bodhisattva's body, but it's emphasized that the Buddha's body takes on whatever form is suited to beings' inclinations. If their minds are not suited to seeing him, they won't manifest. He won't manifest. It is thus like a pure round mirror that simply reflects images in beings' minds without thereby undergoing exertion or effort on its part. So when you look in a mirror, does the mirror think, I think today I'm going to give this person a reflection? No, it's the nature of the mirror to reflect the image of the human. It's the same with the Buddha. The Buddha just reflects what your mind is suited to seeing. So these days we ask, why is it that we don't see? Why is it that we only see statues or pictures of the Buddha? Why can't we see the Buddha in the flesh? It's because our minds are impure. we have kleshas. People who are born at the time of the Buddha, they have lots of good punya. So they're able to be, and even if you're born at the Buddhist time, you could be born on the other side of the world. So it takes a lot of good merit, a good punya, to be able to see the Buddhist body. And manifestation automatically occurs in the mind of the perceiver, while also taking on a form that enables them to make offerings to generate merit. So, how is it that beings can generate merit? The Buddha manifests in such a way that enables them to make merit. So the Buddha creates opportunities for us to make merit. The Buddha creates opportunities for us to give to him, for us to learn from him. And so it's like the light is always shining through the window, but it's up to us whether the curtains are open or closed. So that's where there's a dimension of free will on the part of a practitioner. Then what about the secret of the Bodhisattva's speech? Likewise, the Bodhisattva's speech neither increases or decreases. It naturally accords with beings' capacities. It accords with birthplace, language, and realm, any beings. So no matter what language you speak, the Buddha, when he manifests for you, will speak your language. He will speak in a language that you understand. So in fact, there's a famous passage in Pali that the Buddha told the bhikshus, actually, don't put my words into chanda. Don't put my words into verse. Just put it in a way, in the language that people understand. So of course we like Sanskrit because it's a beautiful language, but really the Buddha would if the Buddha were to manifest today in front of you, he wouldn't speak to you in Sanskrit because no one would understand that. It would be of no benefit. He would speak in Newar, he would speak in Nepali, or he would speak in English, depending on who's listening. Even the deaf can hear it. So if you're deaf, you can hear the Buddha's speech. And it's implied that the speech is communicative content rather than inherently limited sound. Well, this is very profound. So it's actually, the Buddha's speech is actually the meaning, not the actual sound itself. Thus, any communicative content about the Dharma, their speech, is free from bad qualities and is always true, and is a manifestation of unconditioned truth and free from contingency. Okay, this is the most quoted passage. This is the most quoted passage in the sutra here. So you might have heard this one before. From the day and night that he attained the fruit of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, to the day and night that he will enter Mahaparinirvana, within that period the Tathagata has never once uttered a single word. He has not expressed any meaning. Why? Because the Buddha Tathagata permanently abides in samahita. He permanently abides in meditation. So while his words lead beings to awakening, ultimately they express nothing. Words issue forth from his face or other parts of his body, but in fact issue forth from empty space. So because the Buddha is a projection and manifestation, when we are listening to the Buddha speaking, it looks as if words are issuing forth from his mouth, as if there are vocal cords interacting, but actually it's issuing forth from empty space. He does not intend even to give rise to divisions of scriptures, like sutras, jatakas, avadanas, and so forth. But, according with beings' natures, he expresses the Dharma just like a magical instrument plays when wafted by the breeze. I gave this analogy earlier. Ultimately, the Dharma is not expressed in words, but is infinitely adjusted and exemplified by different ways of expressing the Four Noble Truths. So the reason that Tathagata doesn't say a single word is because if you were to say a single word, it would be bounded, it would be limited. It's actually unlimited. When we hear a word, that's only in our mind. The Buddha's actual speech is silent. There's no sound. There's no noise. It's non-dual. But when we hear that silence, we hear loads of words, and it goes over our head. We can't even understand those words. But some of them are perfectly suited to our natures. So that's the teaching of the Buddha's speech. And what's the teaching of the Bodhisattva's mind? It said Bodhisattvas are no longer bound to samsara and have nothing to retain. Their minds are inherently non-calculative. If there is something to be known, then obstruction arises. If there is something to retain, one is on the level of Shravaka Dharma. The discrimination of all distinctions, which goes beyond all discriminations, is the non-attainment of any Dharma. So the whole path for the Bodhisattva in terms of the Bodhisattva's mind, is to realize that there's nothing to attain. But so long as there is calculation and there is the dualistic perception of a path, then there is a path. And it's very hard for us to get to that point because we have lots of afflictions and habits. Thus, their minds are purity and thusness itself, and equated with the knowledge of all things in all times. They nothing is being attained because he already has the Buddha's mind within his body. So despite cutting off the fires of desire and the sense objects that give rise to the deluded mind, the Bodhisattva still maintains the ability to use sense objects for awakening. So despite the non-reality of all dharmas, Bodhisattvas can still manifest among sense objects in accord with these inclinations. So even though from a Buddhist or Bodhisattva's perspective, they know that this room is just a projection of our mind, they can work within it in such a way that makes sense to us. They act as if they are just another deluded being, but their true nature is that they are not. And that's also our true nature, but we have to realize it and arouse bodhicitta. And the paramitas that they teach, the perfections, are expressed in words and sense objects that result in the counteracting of them. Thus, the transcendent Bodhisattva is simultaneously depicted as being an entirely this-worldly being, able to manifest within samsara to nurture and mature beings' wholesome roots, suggesting that it's fear of samsara that motivates the Shravakas to escape samsara. So what is the difference between the Shravakayana and Bodhisattvayana? Shravakayana is, we see the afflictions and we have fear of continued samsara, and we want to leave samsara. The Bodhisattva's perspective is that the world is actually is truly thusness. It's tathata. But they will continue to manifest in this world to help beings, manifest in a form and appearance that helps beings. So that's why bodhisattvas have all of these different appearances with all of these different things in their hands and these expressions on their faces. It's in order to help us. So similarly, the sutra itself, expressed in so many words, is declared indeed to be unarisen. So even the Tathagataguhya, even the Tathagataguhya Guhya Nirdesha is unarisen, and it consists of no words. even though when printed the sutra is 300 pages, actually it's only the letter A. Only A. It's nothing. It's unarisen. And if something is unarisen, it can't cease. It can't end. That's why the Dharmakaya is infinite. It's nitya. So our body is everything in samsara is impermanent. Anitya is devoid of self, anatma, and is suffering, dukkha. But everything on the side of Tathagatagarbha is nitya, is atman, and is shuddha, is pure, and is sukha, is bliss. That's nirvana. That's the teaching of the Nirvana Sutra. Thus, the power of vidyas for the perpetuation of the Dharma is none other than the no self, no being, and no Dharma, both separate and identical to all Dharmas, that are the Tathagata's body, speech, and mind. The irony of the letter A, by which the Devaputra Bhadravaja gains eloquence, also expresses this knowledge, but is also inexpressible and unarisen. So A is unarisen because it also, just in terms of the meaning of A, it means no, it means none. This unbounded emptiness and non-arising allows for the vast space within which manifestations pregnant with meaning and inspiration for aspiring bodhisattvas can spring forth from silence like an echo, reflection, or magical instrument wafted by the winds of our karmic inclinations. So when a Buddha or Bodhisattva speaks, their speech is actually like an echo. We speak, and then we hear our voice back. So when we're hearing the Buddha speak, we're actually hearing our own minds. So this is the end. So I'll just finish by giving you a very quick picture of the outline of the sutra, and it's available. It's available for free. You can read it for free on the website Shingan's portal. I haven't written it down anywhere. I can't, okay, I can't write it there. Anyway, you can ask me if you're interested after. I can give you the address. You can also Google Secrets of the Tathagata. Just Google Secrets of the Tathagata and you'll find it. And there's a new edition which has, it has the Sanskrit folio numbers for the manuscript. So if you're following along with the Sanskrit edition, you can see the equivalent passages. But yeah, this is roughly the structure of the sutra. And yeah, I hope that was entertaining in some way in terms of the narratives, the stories. They're very interesting stories in the sutra. I hope in terms of this teaching of the Bodhisattva's body, speech, and mind as being something which we already possess. We just need to give rise to bodhicitta and practice in the conventional form of the path. I hope that's inspiring, and I hope that in some way this encourages everybody to consider this sutra, and yeah, and we can also discuss a bit more now. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, Sugata College, and thank you everybody for your very, very kind attention. And I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander, for your valuable lecture.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alexander O Niel, for his very important about the secrets of Tathagata. And it's very difficult to understand for the layman. So I also feeling very difficult to understand all these things. Anyway, it's a very deep studies about this Nava Sutra, and I think it will be much more better if we can hear something from our Dr. Bajraj Sakiri, our advisor and most learned man, which is the advisor in our this Nepal Bhasa Parishad, and it is Sugata Buddhist College. And I think I request Dr. Bajraj Sakiri to explain in Nepali a few words or in very short about this sutra. I think it will be better.
First of all, I want to thank you very much, Dr. O Niel, who you came from London and you belong to the School of London.
Canada.
Coming to Nepal, you studied about our culture and our religion, and you sacrificed so much. Whereas we people, we ourselves don't know so much about these tantric texts. I remember we and the officials of Lotus Center tried to publish Guhyasamaja Tathagataguhyaka. We tried to find that and we could not find that. So in consultation with Pandit Vajrasarja, we published Tantra, not Sutra. And I'm especially happy today because I got the opportunity to listen to Sutra, Tathagataguhya Sutra. This is a rare opportunity, so I'm especially happy today, and thank you for that. So far, the importance of Tathagataguhyaka, I don't know so much about. Only today I came to know a little bit about Tathagataguhyaka. We publish Tantra. While publishing, I wrote a few words about that. So as I remember that, I would like to talk a little bit about that. Tathagataguhyaka is the sutra, one of the 9 sutras, and that we worship as the Dharma, Mandala, and that tells about a lot about our Tantric Buddhism, I think. And we know not so much about Tathagataguhyaka and Guhyasamaja Tantra. I feel that these tantras tantra is a part, is a technology that enables us to translate our theories, our knowledge into practice. This is one of the ways to translate our thinking into practice. I think that tells the ways how we can translate, we can use those theories, and you explain all these things in detail. So I am so much happy. Now, right now I'm not in a position to speak more about this. Only I want to thank you very much. And this is one of the most important sutras in our viharas. And you told about that, and that is very interesting and very meaningful to us. Thank you very much. नेपालीमा अलिकति उहाँले नेवारी पनि बोल्नुहुन्छ, यसरी नेपाली पनि बोल्नुहुन्छ र उहाँले भन्नुभएको कुराहरू अलि उहाँको इङ्ग्लिस यो उहाँ साँच्चै अङ्ग्रेज नै हुनुहुन्छ, लन्डनमा बस्नुभएको, लन्डन युनिभर्सिटीबाट आउनुभएको अघि र उहाँ जस्तो व्यक्ति नेपाल आएर गेल्नर जस्तै यहाँ बसिकन यहाँ पार्टिसिपेट भएर यहाँको चाहिँ अब्जर्भेसन गरिकन स्टडी गरिकन उहाँले चाहिँ हाम्रो नेपालको एउटा मुख्य सूत्र तथागतागुह्यको जुन उहाँले अध्ययन गर्नुभयो त्यसको बारेमा हामीलाई बताइदिनु भयो। यो चाहिँ हरपट चाहिँ सुन्न पाइने कुरा होइन। मैले पनि यो फर्स्ट टाइम चाहिँ यो तथागतागुह्यको सुन्न पाएको हो। म धेरै वर्ष मोटर सेन्टर र यहाँ बसेर काम गर्दाखेरि पनि यो अपर्च्युनिटी मैले पाएको थिइनँ। आज मैले पाएँ, त्यसैले मैले उहाँलाई भने मैले म अलिकति कान चाहिँ सुन्न चाहिँ अलिक गाह्रो भएको छ, तर जति मैले हेरेँ उहाँले राम्रोसँग प्रेजेन्टेसन गर्नुभएको कुराबाट मैले के अलिक बुझेँ भनेदेखि हुन त मलाई चाहिँ बुझ्नु पनि अलिक गाह्रो भइसकेको छ। हाम्रो चाहिँ जुन तन्त्रहरू हुन्, अब उहाँले भन्नुभएको सूत्र हो, सूत्र र तन्त्रमा चाहिँ के फरक छ? सूत्रले चाहिँ धेरै जसो हामीलाई थ्योरीको कुराहरू बताउँछ, तन्त्रले चाहिँ त्यो थ्योरीलाई कसरी ट्रान्सलेट गर्ने, कसरी प्रयोग गर्ने भन्ने कुरा गर्छ। तन्त्र र थ्योरीको बिचमा अलिकति त्यही फरक छ मैले बुझेअनुसार कि म यो कायबाट चित्त शुद्ध गर्ने मुख्य चाहिँ अभिप्राय जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई। यो कायबाट चित्त कसरी चाहिँ शुद्ध गर्ने, यो बोधिसत्वको हिसाबले र सारी याद अब बजार पानी भएको हुनाले तन्त्रको हिसाबले पनि यो मुख्य चाहिँ फोकसन केमा छ भनेदेखि कसरी हाम्रो चाहिँ काय जुन हामी सलिडको रूपमा एउटा चाहिँ के को रूपमा भनेदेखि हामीले चाहिँ एउटा मेटेरियलिस्टिक रूपमा चाहिँ यो शरीरलाई हामीले हेरिआएको छौँ र यसले स्पिचलाई पनि हामीले मेटेरियलिस्टिक हिसाबले, स्थूलको हिसाबले, सलिडको हिसाबले चाहिँ हामीले हेरिआएको छौँ। यो चित्तलाई पनि हामीले त्यसरी नै हेरिआएका छौँ र यसलाई चाहिँ कसरी हामीले शून्यको रूपमा हामीले हेर्ने हो, त्यसलाई शून्यको रूपमा हामीले कसरी चाहिँ रियलाइज गर्ने हो भन्ने कुरा, त्यो बाटो, त्यो एउटा पाठ, त्यो एउटा चाहिँ टेक्नोलोजी यो चाहिँ उसले चाहिँ तन्त्रले देखाउँछ चाहिँ। यो यसमा मण्डलको कुरा उहाँले चाहिँ मण्डलको कुरा त ल्याउनु भएको छैन। निष्पन्न योगावलीमा मन्त्र त्यो चाहिँ ऊ छ होइन, यसरी चाहिँ मण्डलमा एउटाहरू यो जुन गुह्य समाजको पनि मण्डल छ र यो फादर तन्त्र भन्छ होइन। अब यो फादर तन्त्र र मदर तन्त्रको बिचमा अलिक सोध्नु मन लागेको थियो उहाँलाई चाहिँ वाइ इट इज कल गुह्य तन्त्र गुह्य समाज तन्त्र इज ए फादर तन्त्र एन्ड वाइ चक्रसंहिता एन्ड हेबल तन्त्र दे आर कल मदर तन्त्र वाइ फादर एन्ड मदर। It will be interesting to listen to that. मुख्य मैले भन्न चाहेको के हो भने कि यो सम्पूर्ण तन्त्रहरू यो चाहिँ कुरा हो त्यो चाहिँ एउटा प्र्याक्टिकल्ली चाहिँ हामीले युज गर्ने कुरा हो। ढिकीमा बोतलमा बसेर हाम्रो कोठामा बसेर अभ्यास गर्ने कुरा हो। यसैले यो कुरा गर्नुभन्दा पनि यो गर्ने तरिका यसलाई चाहिँ साँच्चैकै हामीले चाहिँ प्रयोग गर्ने कुरा भएको हुनाले यो गुह्यको रूपमा यो भन्नुभन्दा पनि गुह्यको रूपमा र अलिक गाह्रो पनि कुराहरू यो हेर्दै हामीले अगाडि देखेको यो शरीर जुन हो म बोलिरहेको छ मेरो टाउको छ मेरो शरीर छ यी सब कुराहरू मेरो शरीर र मेरो यो वचन जुन बोलिरहेको छ त्यो तपाईँहरूले सुनिराख्नु भएको छ देखिराख्नु भएको छ। त्यस कुरालाई देखेको कुरा सुनेको कुरा र विचार जुन गरिएको कुरा हो साक्षात् आफ्नो अगाडि देखिराखेको कुरा त्यसलाई शून्यको रूपमा कसरी देख्ने कसरी रियलाइज गर्ने यो त अचम्मको कुरा यो त गाह्रो कुरा। यो स्थूल कुरालाई शून्य भनेर चाहिँ हेर्नको लागि एउटा चाहिँ मिस्टेरियस एकदम गजबको चाहिँ एउटा गाह्रो चाहिँ काम छ यो। र यो काम कसले सिकाउँछ भनेदेखि यो चाहिँ गुह्यका र चाहिँ यो तथागत गुह्यका त्यो थ्योरीको रूपमा र चाहिँ जुन यो के अरे गुह्य समाज प्र्याक्टिकल रूपमा यसले चाहिँ सिकाउँछ। यो स्थूललाई अगाडि देखेको सलिड चिजलाई शून्यको रूपमा रियलाइज गर्ने तरिका र यी कुराहरूले चाहिँ बताउने भएको हुनाले यो अत्यन्त महत्त्वपूर्ण कुरा जुन छ आज हामीले सुन्न पायौँ र त्यसैले यसको लागि फेरि पनि उहाँलाई एकचोटि धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु। र म उहाँलाई एकचोटि फादर र मदर किन भनियो त्यो भन्नुभएको भए अलिक you know what that would be interesting, I think.
धेरै आभार प्रकट गर्दछु डाक्टर बुद्धज्यू सर यस कलेजका संस्थापकज्यू पनि सल्लाहकारज्यू पनि हुनुहुन्छ र अहिले म यस सुगत बौद्ध महाविद्यालयमा हाम्रो एमए इन महायान बुद्धिज्म स्टडिजमा हामीले संस्कृत इन बुद्धिस्ट लिटरेचर पनि हामीले चाहिँ पाठ्यक्रममा राखिएको छ र यसो विषयमा चाहिँ हाम्रा गुरु श्री शान्त श्री बजाचार्यले अध्यापन गर्नुहुन्छ र यस विषयमा के कस्तो हाम्रो चाहिँ कलेजमा विद्यार्थीहरूले चाहिँ अध्यापन भइरहेछ यसबारे छोटो चर्चा गरिदिनु न म सरलाई आग्रह गर्नेछु।
धन्यवाद। नमो बुद्धाय, नमो धर्माय, नमो सङ्घाय। यहाँ विराजमान हुनुभएका पुस्तपाल देवतालाई वन्दना गर्दछु। त्यसै गरेर यहाँ उपस्थित हुनुभएका पौर परिषदका कायम अध्यक्षज्यू अनि बजराज सरज्यू, त्यसै गरेर सुगतका प्राचार्य म्यामज्यू, गुरुवर्गहरू अनि उपस्थित सम्पूर्ण सबैलाई म हृदयदेखि नमस्कार गर्न चाहन्छु। अब हुन त साथै यहाँ प्रेजेन्ट गर्नुहुने अलेक्जेन्डरलाई पनि अब हुन त सबै कुरा यहाँ आइसकेकै छ है। खासै मैले भन्नुपर्ने त्यति मैले देख्दिनँ यहाँ, तर म अलिकति के भन्न चाहन्छु भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ हामी यो नेपाल मण्डलको बद्रयानी भनौँ, बद्रयानी पूजा अर्थात् चाहिँ हामी यो नेवार बुद्धिज्मै भनौँ, त्यसमा चाहिँ हामी बुद्ध धर्मसँग जुन अघि मैले पनि भने जुन नव बुद्धाय, नव धर्माय, नव सङ्घाय, जुन बुद्धको रूपमा हामीले चाहिँ अतीतका बुद्ध, अहिलेका बुद्ध, भविष्यका बुद्धको साथै पञ्चबुद्ध भनेर चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ यो पूजा आजा गर्ने बेलामा जहिले पनि यो 8वटा 8 पले भन्छ 8वटा पाठ भएको हामी चाहिँ त्यो चित्र लेख्छौँ है। त्यसमा चाहिँ बुद्ध मण्डलमा चाहिँ बिचमा वैवर्तन, अगाडि अक्षोभ्य, एउटा सम्भव, अनि अमिताभ, अनि उता अमोघ सिद्धि, अनि कर्नरमा माम्के लोचनी पत्नी तारा भनेर हामी बिचमा एउटा अनि 8वटा हक्काले भन्दै के भन्दैन त्यो भयो। त्यसै गरेर धर्म मण्डलमा चाहिँ जुन चाहिँ अघि उहाँले देखाउनु भएको छ बिचमा प्रज्ञा पारमिता, अनि अगाडि या पूर्वतिर चाहिँ तपाईँको गण्डव्य सूत्र, अनि यता दायाँ साइडमा चाहिँ तपाईँको दायाँ साइडमा तपाईँको दशभूमि, अनि माथि पछाडि भनौँ समाधिराज सूत्र, अनि तपाईँको उता लेफ्ट साइडमा तपाईँको लङ्का अवतार सूत्र। अनि त्यसै गरेर कर्नरमा तपाईँको एउटा आउँछ तल सत धर्म पुण्डरीक, अनि माथि अग्नि नैऋत्य कोणमा जुन आउँछ तथागतगुह्यक। यहाँ चाहिँ मेन कुरा चाहिँ तथागतगुह्यक या गुह्य समाज तन्त्र, अनि उतातिर तपाईँको ललित विष्टर, अनि लास्टमा तपाईँको लास्टमा सुवर्ण प्रवासी सूत्र भनेर यस्तो 9वटा छ। यो जुन चाहिँ धर्म मण्डलमा आइरहेको 9वटा मध्येमा आज यहाँ मेन विषय भनेको चाहिँ तथागतगुह्यको सत्तामा गुह्य समाज तन्त्र र तथागतगुह्य भन्नेमा चाहिँ जुन हामीले अहिले धर्मको रूपमा लिइरहेका छौँ त्यसमा तथागतगुह्य के छ त भन्ने कुरामा बहस हो है। त्यसै गरेर सङ्घ मण्डलमा तपाईँले थाहै छ बिचमा चाहिँ आर्यवल्लभेश्वर रहेर अनि 8वटा तपाईँको चाहिँ अष्ट बोधिसत्व भयो। अब अलिकति कुरा गरौँ यहाँ तथागतगुह्यको सम्बन्धी कुरा गरौँ है। अब तथागतगुह्य सम्बन्धी चाहिँ हामी धर्ममण्डललाई यो पूजा गर्ने बेलामा एउटा श्लोक छ तपाईँको है, यो नेपाल मण्डलको बद्यानी पूजा विधिमा जहिले पनि त्यो श्लोक भन्छ। त्यो श्लोक चाहिँ मैले यो किरा सङ्ग्रह, यो गुरुदत्तको किरा सङ्ग्रहमा त उल्लेख भएको के छ भन्दाखेरि प्रज्ञा पारमितां नमामि सत्यं गण्डव्यं दश भूमीश्वर समाधि सहितं लङ्कावतारं सद्धर्म पुण्डरीकं गुह्यसुगतं ललित विस्तरकं सुवर्ण प्रवासतं शीर्षा धर्मानां मुक्तिपडा भनेर यसरी लेखेको छ। यो भन्दाखेरि यसमा चाहिँ ठ्याक्कै 9वटा सूत्र आउँछ है। त्यसमा चाहिँ के छ त भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ तथागत गुह्य त्यसरी लेखेको छैन कि गुह्यसुगतम भनेर लेखेको छ। भनेको मतलब गुह्यको सुगतम भनेको सुगत भनेको त तपाईँलाई थाहा छ, बुद्धलाई सुगत, तथागतलाई सुगत भन्ने हो होइन। त्यसै कारणले यो भन्न खोजेको गुह्य सुगतम भनेको तथागत गुह्यक भनेको नि देखिन्छ। भनेको मतलब चाहिँ अहिले आएर चाहिँ हामीले अघि मिलन सरले पनि भन्नुभयो होइन, तथागत गुह्यको सत्तामा अहिले गुह्य समाज तन्त्र राखेको छ होइन। अब यो गुह्यको समाज चाहिँ अघि बद्रराज सरले पनि भन्नुभयो कि यो मतलब नजिकको त्यस्तो भन्नुभयो होइन, खासै त्यस्तो चाहिँ होइन। यो तथागत गुह्यको चाहिँ कस्तो छ त भन्दाखेरि यो मैले यहाँ हेर्दाखेरि यो शान्तिदेवको चाहिँ शिक्षा समुच्चयमा पनि बक्कैदा उल्लेख छ। शान्तिदेव भनेको 7औं शताब्दी तपाईँलाई थाहै छ होइन। उहाँले पनि यो तथागत गुह्यको चाहिँ मतलब चाहिँ चर्चा गर्नुभएको छ कि उहाँले चाहिँ यो पाप देशना भन्ने एउटा च्याप्टर छ तपाईँको। त्यस च्याप्टरमा चाहिँ एकजना बोधिसत्वले चाहिँ आफू मरेपछि आफ्नो शरीर चाहिँ मसानमा रहँदाखेरि आफ्नो शरीरलाई चाहिँ ती पशु पन्छीहरूले खाएर उनीहरू चाहिँ मुक्त हुन् भनेर चाहिँ सम्म कल्पना गर्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ शान्तिदेवले शिक्षा समुच्चयमा चाहिँ उल्लेख गरेको हामी पाउँछौँ है। त्यसै गरेर यो चाहिँ अर्को चाहिँ तपाईँको चाहिँ चन्द्रकीर्ति जुन चाहिँ चन्द्रभूमिको गुरु हुनुहुन्छ उहाँ पनि 60औं सम्बन्धी, उहाँ चाहिँ 600 ईस्वीसम्मको हो चन्द्रकीर्ति। उहाँले पनि आफ्नो चाहिँ तपाईँको बकैदा साथ चाहिँ छ नि प्रसन्न पद मूल मध्यम कालिका टीका भन्नेमा चाहिँ यो गुह्य मतलब तथागत गुह्य सम्बन्धी स्पष्ट व्याख्या गर्नुभएको छ। त्यसै गरेर प्रज्ञा कर्मतीको चाहिँ बोधिचर्या तथा पञ्जिका भन्नेमा पनि छ यही गुह्य समाज यो तथागत गुह्यको। त्यसै गरेर कमल शिवलाको भावना क्रम भनेर जुन हाम्रो टेक्स्टमै छ है त्यसमा पनि उल्लेख छ यो तथागत गुह्यको। त्यसै गरेर मैले यो अर्को एउटा विभिन्न यो तन्त्रहरूको टीकाहरू छ, टीकाहरूमा पनि थुप्रै ठाउँमा चाहिँ तपाईँको तथागत गुह्यको सम्बन्धी उल्लेख भएको छ। अब त्यसमा चाहिँ के छ त भन्दाखेरि त्यसमा चाहिँ अब यो चाहिँ खास चाहिँ तथागत गुह्यको भनेको चाहिँ रत्नकूट सूत्र भनेर 49वटा चाहिँ भएको एउटा तङ्ग्युरमा पनि समावेश छ। रत्नकूट सूत्र भनेर जुन यो हिप अफ द जोइल्स सूत्र भन्छ के अरे त्यसमा चाहिँ सङ्ग्रहित भएको मध्ये एउटा हो यो तथागत गुह्यक भनेको मतलब चाहिँ तपाईँको चाहिँ यो हाम्रो 4औं सेमेस्टरमा हो के अरे उपाय कौशल्य सूत्र भन्ने पनि छ। त्यो पनि एउटा बुद्धिस्ट सूत्रबाटै ल्याएको। त्यसै गरेर यो चाहिँ तपाईँको गुह्य समाज र यो तथागतगुह्यकोमा चाहिँ के मात्रै फरक छ त भन्दाखेरि यो अगाडिको चाहिँ श्लोक चाहिँ सेमै छ। फेरि अगाडिको चाहिँ श्लोक मैले यहाँ लेखेर ल्याएको छु होइन। त्यसमा के लेखेको छ भन्दाखेरि गुह्य समाज तपाईँहरू पनि हेर्नुहोस् होइन। गुह्य समाज र तथागतगुह्यकोमा ओम नमो बुद्धाय ओम होइन, सबभन्दा पहिले चाहिँ ओम नमो श्री बोधिसत्वाय भनेर लेखेको छ। त्यसपछि चाहिँ ओ नमो बुद्धाय, ओ नमो धर्माय, ओ नमो सङ्घाय भनेर चाहिँ यो तथागतगुह्यकोमा छ। यो चाहिँ गुह्य समाजमा छैन। त्यसपछि चाहिँ एवं मया श्रीरोन्मेदस्मिन् समय भगवान सर्व तथागत काय वाक चित्र हृदय वज्र योषित भगेशु विदहार भनेर चाहिँ गुह्य समाज र त्यसमा दुईटैमै सेम छ। तर त्यसपछिको जुन चाहिँ च्याप्टर छ फरक छ। अब तपाईँको गुह्य समाजमा चाहिँ तपाईँको चाहिँ जम्मा 18वटा च्याप्टर भएकोले चाहिँ अष्टादश पटल भनेर हामी जान्छौँ। यो चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ हाम्रो यो अहिलेको यो महायानी सिलेबसमा चाहिँ हामीले पढ्नुपर्छ। यो मात्रै होइन कि हामीले यो 9वटै सूत्र सम्बन्धी पढ्नुपर्छ, भित्रै मतलब टेक्स्चुअली स्टडी गर्नुपर्छ होइन। त्यसमध्येमा यो पनि आउँछ कि तथागतगुह्यको पनि मतलब चाहिँ सम्बन्धित चाहिँ के छ भनेर चाहिँ हामी पढ्नुपर्छ होइन। त्यही कारणले चाहिँ यहाँ अघि मैले सुन्दाखेरि तथागत चाहिँ अहिले उहाँ प्रेजेन्टेसनले उहाँले पत्ता लगाएको जस्तो छ, तर त्यस्तो होइन। मसँग पनि यसको कपी छ, यसो एसियाटिक सोसाइटीबाट जुन चाहिँ बकाइदै छ यसको चाहिँ तथागतगुह्यको। हामीलाई यति मात्रै हो कि तथागतगुह्यको ठाउँमा चाहिँ गुह्य समाज तन्त्र किन राखियो त्यो एउटा चाहिँ मतलब जिज्ञासाको कुरा हो। अब हामीले चाहिँ पूजा गर्ने बेलामा पनि अहिले गुह्य समाज भनेर भनिआएको छैन, तथागतगुह्यकै भनेर हामी पाठ गर्छौँ, वन्दना गर्छौँ होइन। त्यो मेन विषय चाहिँ त्यो भयो। अनि चाहिँ अब यो तथागतगुह्यको नाम पनि चाहिँ छ नि, थै नाम दिएको छ। तथागतगुह्यको सूत्र, तथागतगुह्य कोश सूत्र पनि लेखेको छ कुनै कुनै ठाउँमा। अनि अघि उहाँले भनेर चाहिँ तथागतगुह्यको पनि राखेर तथागतगुह्यको राखिएको छ होइन। त्यसैले गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो मेन चाहिँ अब मैले भन्नुपर्दाखेरि हाम्रो यो महायानी कलेज भएको हुँदाखेरि हामी यसरी डिटेलले पढाइ चाहिँ छ। हाम्रो यो 14औं सेमेस्टरमा तपाईँले हेर्नुभयो भने चाहिँ यो 9वटै सूत्रमै हामी भित्र गएर पढ्छौँ। अलावा हामीले यो तथागतगुह्यको सत्तामा गुह्य समाज तन्त्र किन राख्यो भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ अब यो हाम्रो सिलेबसमा छैन। अझ यो चाहिँ उहाँले चाहिँ मतलब प्रश्न गर्नु पाए चाहिँ राम्रो हो। यति भन्दै चाहिँ यो खासै चाहिँ म अन्तमा के भन्न चाहन्छु भन्दाखेरि यो जुन धर्मको रूपमा लिइराखेको चाहिँ जुन नवसूत्र छ होइन, यसलाई चाहिँ हामीले यसरी मतलब चर्चा गर्नु पनि पुण्यको कार्य हो भनेर चाहिँ विभिन्न ग्रन्थहरूमा उल्लेख छ। यति मात्रै होइन कि यो भन्ने सुन्ने या सुनेको कुराहरू थाहा पाएर वितरण गर्ने पनि पुण्यको कार्य हो भन्ने चाहिँ उल्लेख भएको हुँदाखेरि आज मलाई यस्तो लाग्छ कि यो हामी अलिकति भए पनि पुण्यको कार्यमा सहभागी भइरहेका छौँ जस्तो मलाई लागिरहेको छ। म यति भन्दै मेरो
धेरै धन्यवाद यहाँ सर्वश्रेष्ठ पदाचार्य सरलाई र यहाँ उपस्थित हुनुभएका सम्पूर्ण आदरणीय सम्पूर्ण विज्ञज्यूहरूबाट पनि केही प्रश्न छ भने हाम्रा डाक्टर अलेक्जेन्डरज्यूलाई चाहिँ सोध्नु अनुरोध गर्दछु।
सर्वबुद्धं नमस्कारं करोति अरिजपास्तं भगवन्तं श्रीचैतन्यं सत्ततया नमामि। मेरो क्वेसन त यति मात्रै छ, यसको गर्नु त्यसको अगाडि यसको यो सूत्रबारे केही एड गर्न मन लाग्यो। जस्तै सरले पनि यसको बारे केही जोडिदिनु पर्यो भन्ने थियो भने उहाँले भन्नुभएको थियो। अनि त्यसैले अब आज यहाँ विवरणमा नआएको विषयमध्ये यहाँ हाम्रो नेपालको बुद्धिज्ममा सूत्र र तन्त्र भने दुई किसिमको ग्रन्थहरू पाइन्छ। सूत्र र तन्त्रमा फरक के हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि जस्तै हामी एवं मया श्रुतं भगवान् राजगृह विरति स्म भन्ने त्यसो आउँछ, तन्त्रमा त्यसो आउँछ। त्यसमा यो जस्तै अघि उहाँले पढ्नुभयो त्यसले जान्छ यो भगेशु बिज हाटी स्म भने त्यसरी आउँछ फर्क चाहिँ एउटा त्यो हो। अनि तन्त्रमा यो सूत्रमा परिवर्त भनेर आउँछ, प्रथम परिवर्त, दोस्रो परिवर्त, अनि त्यसको परिवर्तको नाम पनि आउँछ। अब तन्त्रमा पतल भनेर आउँछ, प्रथम पतल, द्वितीय पतल, फरक चाहिँ डिफ्रेन्ट चाहिँ यहाँ आउँछ। अब हामी यहाँ जुन आजको प्रेजेन्टेसन गर्नुभएको छ त्यो किताब चाहिँ सूत्रयानको हो वास्तवमा। अनि सूत्रयान भन्दाखेरि यहाँ पनि अलिक गडबड हुनसक्छ। नेपालमा सूत्रयानको परम्परा भन्दाखेरि यो पारमिता यान, आज पारमिता यानका पिछु यो बिहारहरू त्यस्तो छैन। आजकल काठमाडौँ भ्यालीमा सबै वज्रयानको बिहारहरू हो वास्तवमा। तर कुन झन् लिस्वीकालीनमा नै यसको त्यो पारमिता यानको अभ्यास गर्नेहरू लोप भइसकेको देखिन्छ। त्यो इतिहासमा पारमिता यान चलाउने जस्तो चाइनामा, जापानमा अहिले पनि चलिरहेछ, त्यस्तो परम्परा यहाँ काठमाडौँमा तन्त्रको प्रभावले महायान चाहिँ लोप भएको चाहिँ धेरै अगाडि देख्न सकिन्छ। तर यहाँ नवसूत्र भनेर जुन सेलेक्ट गरेको छ त्यो ग्रन्थ चाहिँ महायानको हो। तर महायानको ग्रन्थमा फेरि यो गुह्य समाज तन्त्र एउटा चाहिँ तन्त्रयानको फसिरहेछ। कुन कारणले होला, अथवा त्यो किताब गुह्य समाज तथागतागुह्यका सूत्र कुनै बेला लोप भएर त्यो काठमाडौँमा कहिले प्राकृतिक प्रकोपले पनि विनाश हुने, कहिले लुटपाटले पनि विनाश हुने, त्यस्तो क्रममा चाहिँ बराबर त्यो भइरहन्थ्यो। त्यसै क्रममा यो सूत्र पनि गुह्य समाज सूत्र पनि लोप भएको हामी बुझ्न सक्छौँ। अब फरक के आउँछ भन्दाखेरि यदि अब यो शिक्षा समुच्चयमा जुन कोट गरेको छ, शान्तिदेवले बौद्धर्यावतारको व्याख्या गर्ने क्रममा त्यो कोट गरेको शिक्षा समुच्चयमा धेरै विषयहरू यो प्र्याक्टिसको अहिले शान्ति सरले पनि एउटा उदाहरण दिनुभयो। त्यो तथागतागुह्यमा पनि यस्तो दिएको छ भन्ने उहाँको यो शान्तिदेवको त्यो स्ट्रक्चरलाई प्रमाणित गर्न उहाँले तथागतागुह्यको माध्यम त्यो कोडहरू धेरै दिएको छ भन्ने त्यसका 500 च्याप्टरको त्यो कोड दिएको छ। यो चाहिँ तथागतागुह्यको भयो। अब त्यो शिक्षा समुच्चयमा दिएको कोड अनुसार बुद्ध धर्मका भगवान् बुद्धका सूत्रहरूको धेरै गम्भीर विषयहरूको शब्दको बारेमा दिएको छ। जस्तै विपसनाको बारे, शून्यताको बारे, शून्यता भने के, कति प्रकारको छ, अथवा प्रतिसोत्पाद भने के हो भने यस्तो गम्भीर विषयहरू नै लिएर त्यो सूत्रमा दिएको छ, कोडमा दिएको छ। सूत्र त पाइँदैन अहिलेसम्म पनि। अब नेपालमा यो तथागतागुह्यका सूत्र कसैसँग पनि तथागतागुह्यक भनेर नाम दिएको हुन्छ, तर गुह्य समाज नै भइरहेको हुन्छ। त्यसैले नेपालमा मात्र होइन कि कहीँ पनि यो गुह्य समाज तन्त्र चाहिँ अहिले भेटाएको चाहिँ छैन। तर एउटा ग्रन्थ तथागतागुह्यक निर्देश सूत्र भन्ने स्ट्याटिक सोसाइटीमा उहाँले पनि उल्लेख गर्नुभएको थियो। त्यो ग्रन्थ चाहिँ अहिले पनि कलकत्तामा छ, यहीँबाट काठमाडौँबाट लिएर उता पुगेको। अब त्यो सूत्र अहिले टिभी पत्रिकामा सिरियली कम्प्लिट पब्लिस भइसकेको छ। वर्ल्डमा एउटै मात्रै सूत्र छ त्यो कलकत्तामा, त्यहाँको पनि अब पब्लिस भइसक्यो यो बनारसबाट। अब यो पनि तथागतागुह्यक सूत्र नै हो। अब यहाँ कम्पेयर यो अब नेपालमा यो जुन नवसूत्रको अनुसार प्र्याक्टिस गर्नेहरू लोप भइसकेकोले अहिले, तर त्यसको अस्तित्व के बाँकी छ भन्दाखेरि नवसूत्र पढ्ने मात्रै सीमितमा, त्यसको प्र्याक्टिस पनि छैन, फेरि अटेन्ड गर्ने पनि परम्परा छैन। प्र्याक्टिस गर्नेमा त्यो पढ्ने मात्रैमा सीमित भइरहेको छ। वास्तवमा हामी शील समाधि प्रज्ञाको महायान अनुसार कसरी प्र्याक्टिस गर्ने भने त्यो 9 घन्टामा दिएको हुन्छ। अब उहाँले जुन तथागतागुह्यका सूत्रको इङ्ग्लिसमा अनुवाद गर्नुभयो, यो सायद यो फर्स्ट टाइम इङ्ग्लिसमा अनुवाद भइरहेको छ। अब उहाँको अनुवाद हामी नेपाली अथवा नेपाली भाषामा पनि अनुवाद गर्नु पाए हामी अहिले जुन यो समाधिराज तथागतागुह्य समाज परिरहेको छ त्यसको ठ्याक्क ओरिजिनल त्यो भर्सन चाहिँ आउँछ। अब यहाँ जुन सूत्रमा जुन अहिले भोजपानी देखिरहेको छ यो चाहिँ शान्त रूपको भन्ने चाहिँ हामीले हाम्रो 8वटा बोधिसत्वहरूमा पनि वज्रपानी आउँछ नि, उहाँ त्यो क्रोध रूप चाहिँ छैन। तर तन्त्रमा फेरि क्रोध रूप हुन्छ। जस्तै नाम सङ्गीतिमा अठ वज्र धर श्रीमान दुर्दान्त धमक पर भने त्यो वज्रपानीको परिचय दिएको छ। त्यसमा उहाँको फेस चाहिँ एकदम यो अलि रफ फुलको फेस, उहाँको बडी यस्तो हातमा यस्तो लिइराखेको भने एकदम डरलाग्दो किसिमको त्यो वर्णन पाइन्छ। अहिले यहाँ सूत्र भएकोले फेरि सूत्रयान अनुसारको उहाँको फेस छ। अब यहाँ सूत्रमा तर अहिलेसम्म पनि मलाई शिक्षा समुदायमा दिएको सूत्र र यो सेम हो कि होइन भन्ने चाहिँ अलिक कन्फ्युज छ। किनभने यो यसमा दिएको अघि उहाँले वज्रको बारे एउटा कथा वर्णन गर्नुभएको छ नि, त्यो ठ्याक्कै यो तथागतागुह्य निर्देश सूत्रमा जुन अहिले इन्डियाबाट प्रकाशित भएको छ त्यसमा उल्लेख गरेको छ। त्यो वज्रको फोर्सको अरूले त्यो उठाउन नसकेको, त्यो वज्रपानीले मात्रै त्यो उठाउन सक्ने भन्ने त्यो विषय यो तथागतागुह्य सूत्रमा उल्लेख गरेको छ संस्कृतमै। त्यसैले योसँग चाहिँ एकदम कुरा मिल्छ। फेरि त्यसमा त्यो अहिले जुन इन्डियाबाट प्रकाशित गरेको किताबमा त्यो बोधिसत्वको कायवाद चित्त र बुद्धको कायवाद चित्तको बारे वर्णन गरेको छ, जुन उहाँले पनि त्यही ठ्याक्कै वर्णन गर्नुभएको छ। अब तर त्यो बुद्धको काय र उहाँको काय जस्तै 32 लक्षण 84 व्यञ्जन भन्ने हुन्छ, त्यसको कायको बारे वर्णन गरेको छ। यदि फेरि स्पिच भन्नेमा चित्त भगवान् बुद्धको काय, वाक भने भगवान् बुद्धको 60 किसिमको आवाज हुन्छ। उहाँको स्पिचमा 60 किसिमको त्यो टाइप हुन्छ। त्यसैले सबै उहाँको कुरा सुन्यो भने एकदम व्यवस्थित चाहिँ भएर उहाँमा लिन हुन्छ। त्यस्तो टाइप चाहिँ छ, त्यसको वर्णन पनि त्यसैमा दिएको छ। त्यसैले मैले कम्पेयर गरेको चाहिँ छैन, शिक्षा समुच्चय र यसको ग्रन्थसँग कम्पेयर गरेको छैन। यदि यसमा वर्णन गरेका कुराहरू शिक्षा समुच्चयको कोडमा छैन भने त्यो फेरि अर्को हुनसक्छ। त्यसैले मेरो अन्दाजमा यो तथागतागुह्य सूत्र, तथागतागुह्य निर्देश सूत्र र गुह्यसमाज सूत्र डिफ्रेन्ट हुनसक्छ। त्यसको बारे के उहाँलाई तथागतागुह्य सूत्र नै हो भन्ने छ कि त्यहीमा एउटा यही प्रश्न गर्न चाहन्छु।
कति कसै जिज्ञासा छ भने चाहिँ सोधिदिनु न, म अनुरोध गर्दछु।
सानो प्रश्न हो, इन्डियाबाट जुन प्रकाशित भएको छ नि त्यो कुन भाषामा हो? जस्तै उहाँले पनि मेन्सन गर्नुभएको छ भर्सनमा नेपाली म्यानुस्क्रिप्ट होइन, एसियाटिक सोसाइटी अफ बेङ्गाल लाइब्रेरी भनेर। भनेपछि त यो हाम्रो नेपाली समाजमा त त्यसको विषयमा त जानकार त अवश्य पनि भएको होला होइन जस्तो लाग्छ मेरो आफ्नो एउटा।
जानकार छैन एकदम
Dhanyavad. As a student of 4th semester from this college, I have little questions here. Where is? That is one. First of all, I would like to know that who is Vajrapani? Vajrapani can be we transferred as a diamond-handed person. Diamond-handed person. Hand with diamond. Vajrapani is a vocabulary translation of the word. And next is Guhyaks and Vajrapani same, Vajra same or not? That much. And otherwise, other is already explained by our Santa sir. Thank you for the Santa sir.
Thank you. So the Vajra Actually, one of the occurrences. Sorry, I can't remember the actual text, but the early occurrence of the term Vajrapani is in reference to Indra, because Indra holds Vajra. So also in Buddhist texts, Vajrapani is holding the weapon Vajra. So this is something which he can use to defend the Buddha and to defeat wrong. Diamond, diamond is of course a meaning of Vajra. Vajra is also supposed to be as hard as a diamond. Nothing can destroy a diamond. So also that's why the Vajra is a indestructible weapon. And the best article on Vajrapani is by Etienne Lamont, although I pointed out that he makes some mistakes with regards to the sutra. But he goes through the whole history of the use of the term Vajrapani. And as regards Guhyaka, Guhyaka is a type of yaksha, and there's no indication that Vajrapani is a Guhyaka, but he is the Adipati of the Guhyakas. So that's why he's Guhyaka Adipati, the Lord of Guhyakas. So Guhyaka is like a kind of mysterious creature, and he lives in Vajrapani's palace. Another Guhyaka, there are two Guhyaka Adipatis. Does anyone know which one the other one is? Kubera. So, this is a topic for research. Maybe somebody at the college can use this as a topic for research. Is Vajrapani and Kubera related? In regards to the discussion of this conflation of Guhyasamaja and Tathagataguhya, there are so many manuscripts of Guhyasamaja from the past 500 or so years, where in the title it's written Tathagataguhya. So and then gradually this mistake Tathagataguhyaka starts coming in. But the correct title is Tathagataguhya Nirdesha Sutra. And it's very interesting how gradually Guhyasamaja took on this identity of Tathagataguhya, and I think it's because people just you needed something for the Navagranta. So now I think someone might have mentioned it would be wonderful if somebody would work on a translation into Nepali or Nepal Bhasa, and you're more than welcome to use my translation as a basis. And using the Sanskrit fragments from Calcutta, you can also translate directly from the Sanskrit into Nepali as well. And also for those others, of course, some people who are translating from Tibetan as well, you can also translate from the Tibetan. So it might be an even more critical translation than from I just did from the Chinese and Sanskrit. But if you translate from my translation, which is based on two Chinese versions, and also from the Sanskrit and also from the Tibetan, you will have the most perfect Guhyasamaja. And this is another thing. Sorry, Tathagataguhya. This is another interesting thing which came to mind a few days ago was, Nishdananda Vajracharya. When he printed the Lalita Vistara with type, his manuscript, he did pratishta on his manuscript. So it would be possible, and his translation is in Nepal Bhasa. So if somebody translates into Nepal Bhasa, or I think probably Nepal Bhasa because the Newar tradition, it's important to the Newar tradition, and then someone performs pratishta on the manuscript, then there can be a Nava Sutra Pata using the original Tathagataguhya someday. It might take a few years, but it's just a dream that I had. I think it would be lovely to see if it's a possibility. But I know it sounds like a tall measure, but it might be possible someday. Thanks so much for your question. Did I answer satisfactorily? Okay, great.
Thank you. My name is Suman Shakya, and I'm not the student of this college, but I am myself as a researcher and a practitioner. And today, especially thank you for your doing such a great work, and which is even outside Nepal in this Buddhist field. So I just want to know if you have also done good research in the Guhyasamaja Tantra. Okay. Then from today's your lecture, I have not gone through this Tathagataguhya Sutra, but I came to know that it's a sutra, but Guhyasamaja Tantra is a tantra. So anybody who reads, go through the Guhyasamaja Tantra, he or she needs to take Abhisheka, because it's in that Guhyasamaja Tantra, all the described things, everything is practical. And such a secret and such a high power practice is there. And in that one version, there is mentioned, as you mentioned here, the Manjupani. In Guhyasamaja Tantra, there is one version that is mentioned is Mandala, and that is Kubera with the 6-hand Kubera. So I would like to know that what is the significance of the description or the mention of Kubera in Guhyasamaja Tantra.
This is a very good question, and as you point out, it is required to receive Diksha to study Guhyasamaja. And actually, I mentioned this to Milan before. I do take seriously the internal ethics of Newar Buddhism, and if something does require Abhisheka or Diksha, I don't dive too deeply. So I haven't made a in-depth study of Guhyasamaja, because you need a guru to understand it. You need a teacher, and it's also of no use unless you receive Abhisheka. But I am aware that it does refer to the Tathagata's body, speech, and mind, and the secret of the body, speech, and mind. And this is also something which occurs in other tantric texts, of course. So I think from a certain perspective we can say definitely, because it talks about Kaya Bhakchitaguhya, that from a certain point of view, Guhyasamaja is the tantric Vajrayana practice of what's being taught in the Mahayana Sutras, including Tathagataguhya. So it's appropriate from that perspective to say of course you can use Guhyasamaja in place of Tathagataguhya. I think that's fine. The only problem is that it's esoteric. It's Guhya. So this is not a tantra, and it's not secret. So anybody can study it. And so with regard to references to Kubera or Jambala in the tantra, yeah, I'm not able to answer that.
There is especially mentioned the 6-hand.
Okay.
So what is the significance?
The 6, yeah, in this sutra there's no physical description of Vajrapani. Yeah, so as far as I know, he's just the conventional, or what would we say, exoteric, the public version, peaceful version, like this. So that's why I chose this form as the cover, because he's just a peaceful form. Yeah, I guess that answers. Was there anything else in the question?
Because I just wanted to ask the significance of the mentioning of the 6-hand.
6 hands. Yeah, that's. I think probably when learning the tantra, one has to ask one's guru. Yeah, I can't answer that question.
Yeah, thank you very much for your excellent and very thought-provoking presentation. As we met in our office, then I have one, even today, Pushpa sir also raised that question. Actually, this is a historical moment, because Tathagataguhya Sutra has never been translated into, not only English, into any languages. The original Tathagataguhya Sutra, I think, is not extant any longer here in Nepal, and nobody even have ever tried to discover the Sanskrit original version. And people are content or complacent, so to speak, to keep considering Guhyasamaja Tantra, and they have been worshipping that text. Even they also recite Guhyasamaja Tantra, thinking that it must be Tathagataguhya Sutra or something like that. But I have not seen anybody or any Bhadracharya recite Guhyasamaja Tantra, in this Sutra Patha, context or something like that you are more interested in. And I also would like to articulate the intention of the Pushpa or the intended meaning of the questions that raised by Pushpa. And he asks you if the Tathagataguhya Sutra, or so we can put it this way. Actually, you have translated Tathagataguhya Sutra from Chinese version, Chinese translation, so to speak. And how do you claim that this Tathagataguhya Sutra is the same sutra that we have been, we have been trying to find, trying to discover? Because the Tathagata Sutra is not extend any longer here. Even the Bhadracharyas, how long we have been trying to search for this sutra. It might not, because the Bhadracharyas also might not have found this sutra. That's why they replace this sutra with Guhyasamaja Tantra. And the contents are also different, In the first place, the contents are also different. So how do you claim that this sutra is the same Tathagata Sutra that we are looking for? Or the sutra in the no Vaipulya text?
Yes. Thank you. So the reason why I think it's an exoteric or non-tantric text, first of all, is because it's in the Dharma Mandala for Poshada Vidhi for the laity. So I think it's not appropriate for there to be, probably wouldn't have been appropriate for there just to be a tantra, right? In such a public situation. And when it's in the context of Acharya Abhisheka, indeed, the Dharma Mandala is different. It has tantras, and it probably, I don't know what the proper form is, but it probably does have Guhyasamaja in there. So how do we know that this one is the same? The first reason is comparing to the Sanskrit, the extant Sanskrit. We can see that the Chinese and Tibetan, the two Chinese versions and the Tibetan version match the Sanskrit fragments. The Sanskrit actually, it's a 45% complete. So 45% of the original Sanskrit is extant. And it matches very, very closely to the latter Dharma-Rakshas translation, almost exactly. What's different is, for example, at the beginning of sections, it has Kulaputra or Kuladuhiter or the name Shantamati in vocative. These are things that change. So maybe the Kulaputra is in a different location, the vocative, those kinds of things. But the content's exactly the same. So how do we know it's the same as the Mahayana Sutra that we've been looking for? First reason is it's in the Lankavatara Sutra. It mentions it doesn't mention the name of the sutra. Sorry. Here, this is really the reason why, because we have also all of these extracts in the Shastric tradition, and so we have discussion of the secret of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind in the Mahapragyaparamita Shastra, which matches the teaching in the sutra. In the Mahayana Sutra Alakara Bhasha, the 60 kinds of speech match chapter 9 in the Tathagataguhya, chapter 9, which discusses the 60 kinds of speech of the Buddha. And in the latter Dharma-Rakshasa version, there's 64 kinds of speech. And in the Shiksha Samuchaya It talks about bodhisattva speech, manifesting good qualities, bodhisattva's path, etc., etc. So this is really how we can know. This is whenever the Shastric commentators are discussing Tathagataguhya, they're talking about this sutra, which is the same as what has been translated into Chinese 2 times, Tibetan once, and we have the fragment. So every reference to Tathagataguhya until the past 500 years, when Tathagataguhya starts being written on Guhyasamaja manuscripts, it's always the sutra instead of the Guhyasamaja. And with regard to this, the importance of Guhyasamaja, of course, in terms of practice. If one receives Abhishek and practices Guhyasamaja Tantra, maybe one can attain Buddhahood in this very body. But the Mahayana Sutras, they conceive of themselves as, they don't conceive of themselves as being incomplete, as being an incomplete path. So if one practices according to the Mahayana Sutras, according to the logic of Mahayana Sutras, one can go all the way to Buddhahood. That's one thing which I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. कसैको अरू केही जिज्ञासा छ भने अन्त यो प्रोग्राम अन्तमै आएको चाहिँ थाने र अन्तमा चाहिँ हाम्रो यस कलेजका सञ्चालक समितिका अध्यक्ष र कार्यवाहक अध्यक्षमा पनि रहनुभएका पूर्वमान चित्रकार सरलाई चाहिँ धन्यवाद ज्ञापन गरिदिनु म विनम्र अनुरोध गर्दछु।
आजको यस कार्यक्रममा डाक्टर अलेक्जेन्डर ज्यूले ओ निल ज्यूले यहाँ जति पनि वर्णन गर्नुभयो यो गुह्य समाजको बारेमा, यसले चाहिँ नि पाठ्यक्रममा नभएका कुराहरू, पाठ्यक्रमबाट नसिकेका कुराहरू यहाँ हामीले विद्यार्थीहरूले चाहिँ नि यो महायानको अध्ययनको चाहिँ सिलसिलामा यसले धेरै नै सहायक हुन्छ भन्ने कुरा मलाई लाग्दछ। र यस किसिमको चाहिँ बराबर यो चाहिँ यो के टक प्रोग्राम, यस किसिमको चाहिँ लेक्चर प्रोग्रामले अवश्य पनि यहाँ अध्ययन गर्नुभएका विद्यार्थीहरूलाई मद्दत मिल्नेछ भन्ने मैले आशा गरेको छु। र आजको यस कार्यक्रममा डाक्टर अलेक्जेन्डर ओ निल ज्यूले चाहिँ जुन एक्सप्लेन गर्नुभयो, जुन वर्णन गर्नुभयो, त्यसमा एउटा कुरो मैले नबुझेको के छ भन्दाखेरि हरेक अङ्ग्रेजीको चाहिँ हरेक नेपालीको हरेक चाहिँ उसको सूत्रको चाहिँ इङ्ग्लिसकरण गरेको छ, इङ्ग्लिसमा चाहिँ लेखेको छ, तर सूत्रलाई कहीँ पनि मैले चाहिँ त्यो या च्यानल या सोर्स या के भन्ने त सूत्र भनेको के हो भन्ने कुरा इङ्ग्लिसमा पनि अलिकति बुझाइदिनु पाएको भएदेखि राम्रो हुन्थ्यो भन्ने कुरा मलाई लाग्छ। किनभनेदेखि यो सूत्रलाई कहिले पनि यो इङ्ग्लिसमा यतिको कुरो लेखेको छ, तर च्यानल भनेर प्रपर सोर्स भनेर अथवा मिन्स भनेर चाहिँ त्यो एक्सप्लेन गर्दाखेरि यो भयो भनेदेखि मान्छेहरूले चाहिँ धेरै बुझ्नु सजिलो हुन्छ कि अब 9 सूत्रमा अब यो एक सूत्र यस्तो चाहिँ महत्त्वपूर्ण सूत्रको बारेमा हामीले छलफल गऱ्यौँ, यो हामीले जानकारी लियौँ। यसको निम्ति उहाँलाई धेरै धेरै चाहिँ धन्यवाद छ। र यस किसिमको चाहिँ कार्यक्रम गर्नमा हाम्रो मिलन सरले बराबर चाहिँ मिलिटरीको काम गरिदिनु भएकोमा उहाँलाई विशेष म धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु। र यस किसिमको चाहिँ कार्यक्रम बराबर होस् भन्ने र विद्यार्थीहरूको पनि सहयोगको लागि विद्यार्थीहरूले पनि यस किसिमको चाहिँ दिलचस्पी लिएर आजको चाहिँ यस कार्यक्रममा उपस्थित भएर यहाँ पाल्नु भएर चाहिँ जुन कुराहरू एकदम गहनका साथ चाहिँ सुनिदिनु भयो र त्यसको निम्ति पनि यहाँहरू सबैलाई म धन्यवाद दिँदै आजको यस कार्यक्रमलाई अन्त्य गर्न चाहन्छु। धन्यवाद।
Buddha